The whole chaos went down inside a cramped company office. Teiichi Arima was still stuck in the office after hours, sprinting through his tasks because he had to finish before the last train left, while Keiichi had already planned to get home on time. So he could duck into the cat cafe and head home, but then this work wrecked his whole schedule. Tachi, a 28-year-old salaryman, was starting to crack. Slowdowns, endless delays, and extra work kept piling up until his job days turned into a constant struggle. To finally unwind, he started sneaking off to a cat cafe, where he feels completely at ease, messing around and cuddling with the fluffiest cats. At last, he slammed the work shut just a few minutes before the train was set to leave. So Taikai sprinted through a shortcut like his life depended on it, just to make it there on time. Then his gaze landed on a gorgeous cat, padding around like it owned the place, watching to see if Teji felt lucky and happy. And right as that cat bolted onto the zebra crossing, a truck came screaming in at full speed. Taikai didn't hesitate for a heartbeat. He lunged to save the cat, but the crash ripped his life away in the same moment. But after only a few tense moments, Taikai finally snapped back to consciousness. He jolted awake and stared at a cozy house, with a warm table set right in front of him. He stared around, baffled. This didn't look like any hospital, until his doubts vanished the moment a cat popped out of the table. He was that same cat again, the one he'd risked everything to save. Safe stepped in, and Tekai let out a huge breath of relief that everything was safe. Then, out of nowhere, the cat's body lifted off the ground, a hollow sat in its head, and it floated there grinning like it was greeting Tekai. She flashed him a few quiet words of deep gratitude, thanking Teichai for coming to her rescue. But Taikai just couldn't pin down what kind of trouble this was. The cat looked him dead in the eye and revealed she was a cat god, so even though she did need saving, she still thanked Teichai for stepping in and for paying the ultimate price. Teichai could barely process it, especially the fact that he was dead. The cat god hit him with the truth again. Yeah, he definitely died. But she still decided to meet him in the afterlife, because the cats he'd cared for in that cafe had already told her one thing: how wildly he loved every single one. Teichai couldn't believe it. His love for cats finally hit the top, cat god level. So cat god snapped that she couldn't stand to watch someone as gentle as him die, and she offered him a way out. If he wanted, she'd send him to another world. Teji just didn't understand a thing at first. She told me straight up, it's basically like stepping into a whole different world, not Earth. But Teichai couldn't shake his fear that his stamina would crash and leave him helpless in that other world, until the cat god grinned and promised, "Don't worry, I'll grant you the strength to survive." Teichai felt his heart lift when he heard that, took the cat god's offer right away, and then she leaned in and asked how he wanted to live in the new world. So yeah, Teichai could go full adventurer, swing swords, sling magic, and carve through monsters, or he could ask for something else entirely, and that's when he started thinking. He refused to choose a job that would drag him into constant fights, and yeah, he didn't want some shady place either, but he also couldn't just do nothing all day. So after a ton of thinking about his second, Taikai finally cracked it. He decided to open his very own cat cafe in another world. Taikai's fierce love for her kind shattered the cat god's heart. Tears poured out of her. So she handed him special abilities that would help him run a cat cafe. She handed him the tamer abilities, an actual job that would let him catch, train, and command monsters. So Teichai could finally take control of those cat-like monsters, because no matter what, they were totally gonna look fluffy. Teiichi was totally ready to tame fluffy monsters, so he grinned and jumped at the chance to become a tamer. The cat god even handed him every skill a tamer could dream of. Then Teichai found out he could open his status anytime with the chant, "Status open," and he thanked her right after. Next, she thrust a bag into his hands too. So when Taikai finally cracked the bag open, the inside hit him like a surprise. It looked nothing like what he'd expected. The cat god explained it. This was a magic bag that could swallow an unlimited amount of anything. Time froze inside that bag, giving him the perfect window to use it to the fullest. She packed in food, cash, and everything else she could think he'd need. Taikai shoved his fingers into the bag to check it, and boom, a window snapped open showing every item inside, and it nearly made his heart jump out of his chest. Then he peered into the bag, jerky, black bread and water, and turned to the cat god, begging to know what food tasted like in the other world. She shot back, honestly, it doesn't taste that different from Japan, and even told her that some monsters end up in the ingredients too, then admitted, with a sigh, that the variety just wasn't nearly as big as Japan's. It sparked an idea in her, so she handed Teichai a set of more specific skills. Then Teichai thanked her right after he got them. She raised the plan to send him straight into the other world as she got ready. She shot Teichai a grateful smile again, thanking him like crazy for saving her life back then. And when it was all over, he grinned and practically couldn't stop himself from saying how relieved he was that she made it out safe. Right after that, Teichai got yanked through space and dropped into a brand new world. He stumbled into the middle of a dense forest out of nowhere, and suddenly the whole world felt like it vanished. He remembered meeting the cat god, and now he was being shipped into a whole new world, way too fancy, like something ripped straight out of a manga. Now he stared at the problem and started weighing his options, what he could do, what he should do next. Then it hit him. His job skill was tame. And when he got exactly what he asked for, embarrassment hit him hard. But yeah, he couldn't help feeling proud once he realized what he was truly capable of. So next, he popped open his status and took a hard look at every skill he'd racked up, over a dozen in his class alone, and tons of standout skills for language, insight, imagination, and even shopping, with something that looked like an ability merit sitting there too. It's claiming the one every fluffy adores, no exceptions. And on top of that, every level of his skill was maxed out, so he could tame even dragons like they were nothing. Then, right on cue, a shadow swallowed his face, and when Taikai snapped around, a dragon bigger than him by 20 times stared back with brutal claws and jagged horns, already choosing him as its next meal. Taikai didn't even think, he just bolted to escape. The dragon blasted a flamethrower at him as he sprinted as hard as he could, pure instinct driving every step. Tachi panicked for a second, then told himself, no, my taming has to work on this dragon. But the moment he imagined the future, he froze, because what was he even going to do with a dragon after that when all he wanted was a cozy fluffy cafe, not a dragon cafe? Right out of nowhere, something crept up from behind the dragon. Then it turned out to be a vicious monster that crunched down on its neck and finished it for good. Tachi's jaw dropped the moment he saw everything unfold. But right then, this mysterious beast snapped its senses onto Taikai like it had been searching for him. Teiichi's attacker barreled forward, closing in to hunt him down, and Teiichi went pale with terror. There was no choice left. So he wasted no time and blasted his taming skill straight at that mysterious wolf-like beast. In that raw moment, Taikai stared into the past, replaying every second of his life, because all he'd really done so far was get crushed by a black company job. Then they ducked into a cat cafe, hunting for instant comfort by getting lost in the soft purrs and cuddly chaos of fluffy little cats. Cats, he loved feeding them, and it genuinely lit him up to spend every spare moment with them. Plus he even had adorable cat pics on his phone he couldn't resist posting. Ever since Tachi started loving those cats, the feeling came right back. Soon the little troublemakers were dying to play with him too. That old life when he'd charm them and become the cat's favorite was the spark behind his fluffy little cafe. But after he died, fate flipped the script. Now he's out there using his taming on a fluffy, wolf-like beast that's about 2 meters long. Taikai couldn't help but wonder if he was in trouble after using the Hammerman impulse. And then it hit him, he's got a converse skill too, so he can talk his way through this. Suddenly, that dangerous beast roared that it couldn't believe it was being tamed so easily, because in its mind, it never expected to end up following the one it called its offender. Haikai was totally baffled by the beast's thoughts, but he couldn't help feeling relieved that he could actually talk with it. The Fenma wouldn't stop bragging about how he'd wiped out a dragon in one shot, then boom, he got tamed instead, and by a human at that. Taikai just grinned awkwardly, totally stuck on what to say next. And suddenly it hit him, if he slipped out now, would he actually be safe? Just then he caught the fender's tail slipping right beside his, wagging like crazy, and fluffing up so much it practically begged for a closer look. Tachi couldn't stop thanking the universe for this meeting, so he bowed to the cat god and prayed hard, then turned to Fenrir with respect and asked, straight up, whether she'd be willing to become his familiar. Fenrir shot Teichai a question, do you really want me the lone warrior as your familiar? And Teichai didn't hesitate. Yeah, I do. Then Fenrir clocked how weak Teichai looked and decided he'd be an easy target. If he didn't stick close, Taikai would have ended up as the monster's snack, so he pushed to keep him there, and once he got the Fenrir on board, he proudly introduced himself next. And the Fender shoved Teichai and demanded he pick a name for it. You look totally lost, so the Fenrir straight up tells you, when a monster gets tamed, the tamer must name it, and yeah, that's basically just common sense. Before this, Peiki never even knew it was possible. So when it finally clicked, he threw his hands up, thanked the Fenrir for showing him the truth, and admitted it like this. He was still a brand new tamer, and Fenrir was his very first familiar. Fenrir froze in shock, because he truly believed Teiichi was a total expert, but no matter what, he leaned in and demanded Teiichi give him a name. Tachi started thinking, and realized he couldn't just hand a monster, who calls himself a lone warrior, a simple, fluffy nickname. After thinking it through, a name finally hit him, so he called Fenrir Luke. Taikai leaned in and told him Luke's name meant light or something close, and when he heard that it hit him. Luke's coat was already gorgeous, bright and shiny. Luke stared at his fluffy fur, and flashed a grin like he totally loved it. Teiichi couldn't help but find it ridiculously cute. Fenrir roared his name, Luke from now on, and it fit him like a glove, perfect for a beast like that. So Taikai stepped in and begged Luke to watch over him from that day forward. Taichai reached out and stroked Luke's fur, then his hand sank right into it. It blindsided him completely. Taichai had never, ever petted anything this soft, so it made him the perfect guy to make this his very first fluffy familiar. All right, let me break down the world you're about to dive into. This forest sat in the southeast of Lorum, within Shulcatch's kingdom, and it was sealed off behind a barrier, because the monsters that lived there were no joke. They threw up barricades, and a bunch of mages stacked one barrier after another to keep monsters trapped in the forest, so no crisis could ever break out. And when a beast so powerful shatters the barrier and slips through, top-tier adventurers get dispatched fast to hunt it down and bring it to heel. But some monsters were so brutal the barrier couldn't stop them at all, like Fenrir, that proud lone warrior, one of a kind, so all the stories about him lived only in the legends. Before he ever met Taichai, Luke was just roaming the forest under the blazing sun, like it was any ordinary day. Every time Luke headed to the water spot where monsters usually drank, the monsters would suddenly flinch and back away in fear. And then they bolted into the trees, terrified by how dangerous he looked. His overwhelming power and terrifying presence soaked deeper in that forest. But Luke finally got used to that crushing loneliness, started calling himself Fenrir, the lone warrior, and from then on, he bathed in the water like it was the only thing he had left. Water splashed out of him as he violently shook himself dry. Luke stared at his reflection in the water, flashed a grin, and praised himself. I look great today too, then kept the boredom away by enjoying his own company. Luke's stomach rumbled like thunder, and he knew it was time to track down his prey. He was hunting for a dragon to chow down on today, so he tiptoed from branch to branch, silently scanning the trees like a predator on the prowl. While he traveled, Luke kept thinking about what he'd heard, that some humans could cook food so good it could make you forget your own name, but as a lone Fenrir, he never thought he'd taste a single cooked bite. Then the moment he saw a massive dragon sitting right there, he snapped into action and bolted straight for its neck to hunt it down. That's when Luke felt a human nearby, and it threw off his hunt. But just when he thought everything was going wrong, Taichai somehow tamed him instead. He couldn't believe it. He'd actually been tamed that easily. So Luke started seeing Taichai as a force of nature, with this eerie, human-like aura that felt way too dangerous to leave alone. And even though Taichai looked insanely talented, Luke didn't hesitate to become his familiar. And when he realized Taichai could even use the converse skill too, Luke stared at it, completely blown away. Even so, Taichai managed to snag Luke's attention. When Taichai, his first real someone, stopped sprinting away like every other monster that used to fear him, Luke's respect hit instantly, and he knew right then Taichai was 100 times better than those cowards. He looped around, bracing for the moment someone would finally call him by a name. It was right then, right after Taichai cornered him and asked him to become his familiar. Luke nodded and told Taichai, "Give me a name," and that's when the legendary lone warrior Fenrir was born in it. Luke finally got his name, then Taichai kept pawing at his fur, and Luke's surprise turned straight into annoyance as he snapped, "How long are you gonna keep touching my fur?" Back when he was still a noble Fenrir, legendary as hell, and definitely not the kind you could just rattle like that, Taichai blurted out an apology. Then he told Luke he wanted to head for the city, and demanded to know if Luke knew the way. Luke just smirked and said, "Of course, I know the way." But disappointment hit him hard. How could Tech not know the route to a human city when he's human too? Tech paused and started to think. He couldn't stop wondering if Luke would actually believe him if he told him Teji came from another world. But since Luke was his first familiar, he decided he had to be completely honest. So he leaned in and told Luke, "I've got something I've got to tell you." He broke down everything to Luke, piece by piece, so Luke finally understood the full mess. Luke finally got it. Everything that used to confuse him snapped into place as soon as he learned the truth. He told Taiki that this forest was swallowed up in the deepest wilderness, so deep that humans barely ever came near, and that getting inside would mean pushing through the barrier first. With the dangers roaring all around, Taikai stayed barely dressed, no armor at all for the moment, but then it hit him. He was stuck right in the middle of an unsafe forest, so he had to reach the city fast, no excuses. He told Luke he wanted to hit the city, but his worry wouldn't let up. Was it really safe for a huge monster like Luke to come along? Luke wasn't panicking at all. He just shrank his body to a size a bit smaller than a human. Taikai was ready to storm into the city, then Luke snapped, "Hold on." Since he still hadn't gotten around to eating the dragon he'd hunted, Taichi clocked it and told him to go ahead. While Luke chowed down, Tachi set up a tough, clear shield just to watch, eyes locked on Luke tearing into dragon meat raw. Then the thought hit him, maybe, just maybe, he had real cooking skills. So he tried pouring it onto the dragon meat, but it totally flopped, because he didn't have the key ingredients like magic grass that you need to turn it into real dragon steak. Luke practically exploded with excitement and blurted out to Taichai that he wanted to use Tamer's cooking skills. despite being a total beginner, because he'd heard the food Tamer makes is ridiculously tasty. Teiichi shot back, "Hand me some magic grass and I'll whip up a steak." To track down the rare grass he needed, Taikai leaned on his one-of-a-kind talent and hunted up the good stuff: magic grass, an enchanted mushroom, and a flowering prize. Taikai sprinted out to gather the magic grass, while Luke pressed him with one burning question: why did he even need it? Taichi grabbed the magic grass, hunted up some dragon meat, and cooked up dragon steak like a total game changer. One glance at that steak and Luke's mouth started watering, so he offered it up. And the second Luke caught that mouth-watering smell, he dove in without hesitation. And then he dug in and ate it. Luke went quiet for a few minutes, then finally said the food was insanely delicious. So much better than eating raw, it was like night and day. Luke dug into the dragon meat cooked with his sick skill, and it didn't take long before he was done. Then he leaned in and told Taichi, "Get me another dragon steak soon." He explained that right now he had the materials he could actually use, like dragon skin and nails, and if they sold them, they'd definitely score some cash. Taichi paused and asked, "So, is that okay?" Luke shot back that yeah, he knew money mattered for humans, especially since Luke was brand new to this world, so he had to get it, and Taichi nodded along. He still took the materials, grateful as hell, though part of him worried they might not sell, but he pushed forward and carefully placed them anyway. He crammed every last bit of the materials into the magic bag. Taikai was convinced this was finally the spark his dream needed, maybe sooner than he ever thought, and he just had to grab the money to keep the cafe running. All that was left now was to sprint straight into the city. So Taikai tore through the forest at breakneck speed, riding on Luke like a human rocket. And he wouldn't stop nagging Taichi, "Hold on tight, don't let go." Luke totally struggled to stay on Luke's back at that breakneck speed. That snapped him back 2 hours earlier, when he'd cornered Luke and demanded how long it would take to reach the city. Luke only shrugged and said, "A few hours." Hours slipped by, but even after they kept marching for a while, it still didn't feel like enough. Taichi couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't even getting closer to the city, because he was moving so damn slow. So yeah, he ended up riding on Luke, because he never expected the city to be this far, not even with Luke taking just a few hours. Then Luke leaned in and told Taichi there was a monster lurking nearby, and just as he was about to snatch it, the loot jumped in and dropped the huge bird monster with one deadly shot. Then Taichi demanded that he stuff the monster's body into his bag, hunting every last valuable material. They pushed forward like that, and Luke smashed every single thing that dared to come their way. After only a few hours, after everything, both of them finally pushed through and reached the city, and Luke, right away, got the news out. To Taichi, Loram wasn't just any place. It was the second biggest city in the whole Shulkak kingdom. Taichi scanned the bustling city, packed wall-to-wall with people everywhere he looked. And right at the edges, folks were out in their fields, sweating over the land like every inch mattered. Luke looked around at the calm streets and grinned. He said this city was packed with adventurers and soldiers, had an amazing view from the top, and the monsters barely ever bothered anyone. Taichi practically cheered when he realized all of it, especially the crowd count, was the key to getting his cozy little cafe off the ground, and for now he headed into the city to hunt down places to rest first, even as Luke teased him for acting weak just to find shelter. But right when they were still standing at the gates, the guard eyed Luke's big wolf and demanded, "Are you sure you're not bringing danger with you?" Taikai shot back, "It's safe, trust me." Safe, he'd earned it fair and square, and the guard didn't spot a single issue with that. He was cool with Taichi stepping into the city, until he demanded one thing, his ID. And the moment Taichi heard that, he got totally lost. And he knew his Japanese driver's license had zero chance of working here, so the soldier grilled him, didn't he bring one? So Taichi would need 5,000 shells just to get into the city. And for a second, he froze, scrambling to see if he even had the money. So you go digging through the stuff the cat gods dumped into his hands, and he spots a wallet sitting right there. Taikai dug up 3 huge silver coins from inside the coin itself, but he had no clue what kind of fortune they might be worth. He pressed Luke for answers, but Luke had zero clue about their worth either. So Taikai had to fire that question off to the soldier as his final shot. Then he acted clueless, watching every twitch on his face as the soldier spotted the big silver coins and immediately said he'd go grab some change. Taikai flashed a grin and asked if these would do the job, and the guard nodded. Then Taikai pulled out 5,000 shells, and he passed them to Taichi as change for a single silver coin. Then the shock hit. That one big silver coin was worth a whopping 5,000 shells. Taikai also wanted to lean in and ask that soldier for the best places to stay, somewhere nice to sleep and recharge. The soldier nodded and told Taichi to head straight, then cut left at the Adventurers Guild. Right there he'd find a crescent moon spot called in, where one night set him back 4,000 shells and the food was insanely good. Taikai swallowed his excitement, decided to see it for himself, and realized how one kid in this world could matter just like a single yen back in Japan. Then he headed back to Luke, followed the directions step by step, scanning his surroundings for anything he'd need to know before he opened the cafe. After that, Taikai hit the streets and started exploring the city. Everything felt perfect. Then he finally clocked it. Everybody's stars were stuck to him, like the whole city had singled him out, probably because Luke had that massive wolf energy rolling around in the streets. Taichi stared at the crazy mix of shops and realized he had to grab clothes too. So Lu leaned in and said getting the right equipment had to be his top priority. Taikai shot back that he'd much rather have a real jacket, because those cold winds were biting all the way on Luke's back. So Luke just laughed and called him fragile. And they burst in right as they reached the crescent moon shape inn. But they never saw it coming. An innkeeper slammed the door on them just because Luke, that huge familiar, stood there. Luke straight up told Taichi to look elsewhere, then slammed the door in his face, while Taichi just stood there thinking, so what are we doing now? But Luke was fuming, because there was no way they were gonna give him a place to rest. Taichi decided to shuffle his tasks and hunt for work he could take, so he headed for the Adventurers Guild, until his eyes snagged on a signboard that read, Tamers Guild ****. Taikai decided they could totally find a spot that let big familiars stay with them, so he figured it was worth checking out for a while. So Taikai headed for the Tamers Guild, and from the outside it looked like any plain, forgettable building, nothing special at all. Taikai stepped into the guild, but no matter what he did after setting his gratings, he didn't spot a single soul, and even the main hall sank into pitch-black darkness. It felt like the whole place had been left behind, until a bright, cheerful receptionist named Shelty greeted him with a grin, walked right up, and asked Taichi if that familiar of his was a wolf king. Taichi introduced himself and told her the truth. Luke was a Fenrir. She laughed it off and said it couldn't be true. Fenrir hadn't been seen for a few hundred years, and now it was just a monster from old legends. Taichi had no clue how real that legend was. Then it clicked so THATS why the soldier had looked stunned and called Luca Wolf King too, and Subteki decided not to argue for now. He explained that he'd just arrived from the countryside and still didn't have an ID, and Shelty told him to register with the Tamers Guild, because once he did, his registration card would count as a real ID. Taichi lit up because he pulled off the lie, and once he had her believing it, he practically blurted that he'd definitely register with the guild. Shelty shoved a form into his hands and demanded he fill in every detail to get himself registered. Taichi typed his name, age, and every detail about his familiar, Luke, and he labeled him a Wolf King. Then Luke leaned in and, annoyingly as ever, asked what in the world he thought that meant. He seethed at the idea of being thrown in with those pathetic monsters when he used to be the mighty Fenrir, until Taichi snapped that it couldn't be helped, because Fenrir were the monsters of legends right now. And Luke just realized this whole place wasn't ready for him, because his presence was straight up legendary. He couldn't help but grin at that and started bragging, saying that if Fenrir had to be like him too, then there was nothing to do but accept it. Those two were destined to be legendary. Now Shelty told him to show off his skills, though it was optional, and she made it clear a lot of people would rather keep their gifts hidden. Then she pushed him to write down every goal he had, and said there'd be tons of jobs where you fight side by side with your familiars. Tech caught the meaning fast and started thinking about it. He decided to write down the plain skills, meal making and the usual stuff, while locking away the truly unique ones, because those had cheat code written all over them. He chose healing and curing too, and for his dream, he scribbled out a plan to open a cozy little spot called Fluffy Cafe. Shelty studied his skills and her jaw dropped. He had recovery skills, the kind almost no tamer ever even gets. And when Taikai talked about his dream to open a cafe, he straight up admitted it was because he's terrible at fighting, so he figured he'd win people over with food instead. He made it crystal clear, this wasn't going to be just another cafe, because customers would get to actually interact with fluffy monsters. When Shelty heard fluffy, he looked completely lost, and that's when Taichi realized, this world straight up doesn't even know what fluffy means. So if that's the plan, he'd better unleash that idea in this world through his own cafe, Fluffy, because who wouldn't feel pure joy the moment they're surrounded by fluffiness? After a bit, Shelty finally stormed in with Taikai's personal adventurer's card. Boom. It was the real proof he belonged to the Tamers Guild, stamped with his name, Taikai, his rank F, and the branch, Lorem. She said that thing doubles as his ID card too, so losing it would be a disaster, and the good news is he can swipe it at other places too. Shelty told him he needed to add magic for something important too, so she nudged him to slip a little enchantment right into the card. Taichi tried it and the card instantly lit up with new details. Right when he started to ask Shelty, she snapped, "Don't show me that." This was his official info, showing up, vanishing, and sealing the truth about his ability to cast magic. Taichi leaned in and asked what this feature was for, and she said, "It's for client referrals," and it can also flag crimes or prove to your client you're legit and trustworthy. She promised him that no one could force him to spill this information, and told him that for the jobs, he could just check the request board on the back. Taikai noticed the requests stacked up. People wanted tamers to look after the animals like real caretakers. So Taikai basically admitted, "I can't fight," and decided to play it smart. He'd wait out the chaos and open up a cafe. Shelty figured a guy like him shouldn't even bother, especially once that wolf came prowling to snatch up combat quests, but Taikai still bit his lip and refused to gamble his life. Then he asked if there was anywhere he could stay with Luke, since the inn had turned him away, so she pointed him to a place where Luke could fit, because he was huge. So she told him Tamer's Guild could hook him up with a room too, just 2,000 shells a night, way cheaper than an inn, and Taikai's eyes lit up like, "That's perfect, I want a room here." Shelty asked how long he planned to stay, and he told her, "For now, it's 5 days. I've got to find a job before that clock runs out." Shelty steered him to his room, and as Taikai walked past the hall, his eyes caught an open garden where a pack of dogs was hanging out. Taichai invited Luke to play with them, and Luke snapped back that he wouldn't be dragged into the same mess as those dogs. Luke insisted a giant Fenrir like him would never touch a ball like that, but Taichai could clearly see Luke was dying to play, and would jump at the chance the moment Taichai bought him one. Shelty leaned in and told Taikai that as long as he was part of the guild, he could use the courtyard here whenever he wanted. Taikai thanked her, and she brushed it off like it was nothing, said he was a valuable member of their guild, so if he ever needed a thing, he should just come to her. Right then, Taikai blurted out a brutal question. Why were there barely any tamers here at all? Shelty shrugged it off and said there probably weren't many, but still, it was downright awesome to even have tamers here. Because a tamer and his comrade fight side by side, covering each other's weak spots with style, the real challenge was taming monsters that were stronger than they had any right to handle, so it became known as an advanced profession. Taikai saw it the exact same way, and relief hit her hard when someone finally got what she'd been feeling. She said that was the real reason she was grateful Taikai chose to join them, and she honestly hoped he'd stick around with them as long as he could, while Taikai nodded back. Then he leaned in and asked Shelty if the materials were purchased here. She snapped back that it was the Adventurers Guild doing the buying, while every occupational guild only grabbed the exact supplies needed for its own jobs. Taichai got it instantly and bolted for the Adventurers Guild, towering over every other guild in the whole city. Dozens of adventurers crowded the receptionist counter, all jostling to be next. And Taichai definitely didn't expect this place to be packed so tight with humans. Luke was annoyed to the point of snapping. Taichai marched up to the reception desk, and when his turn hit, the receptionist greeted him and ordered him to dump the materials on the counter so she could assess them. Taichai said he couldn't fit all those materials on this counter, so the receptionist blinked in shock, because Taichai had looked totally empty-handed a second ago. Taichai grinned and told her, "I've got them stored in my magic bag." The receptionist snapped into a surprised stare, and admitted it was a super rare item he just happened to have on him. Then she ordered him to follow her, and Taichai realized this bag was even rarer than he'd ever imagined. They dragged him straight to the dismantling squad, and the guy demanded he dump every material on the table, so Taikai went for the dragon first. Then one monster after another hit the tabletop in rapid succession. That massive table still didn't feel big enough. When the dismantling squad took one look, they went wide-eyed because it wasn't just a pile of monsters, it was a whole lineup of heavy hitters. Dragons, red wolves, falls, and even platinum golems. Taichi was honestly relieved he hadn't brought every monster Luke had already mopped up on the way. After that, the dismantling squad checked the monster corpses and froze. Every single one was brought down with one clean strike. They demanded to know if Taikai was behind it all, and Taikai just smirked. "Nope, it was my familiar." That's what made the guys swear he had to be some ultra-high rank, because who else could pull off a tamer that strong? But the truth was brutal. Taichai was only F rank right now. Then the guys cornered him and demanded what kind of monster Taikai's familiar was. He said it was a wolf king, and Luke instantly blew up with rage. Taichai pet rubbed up against their fur and told them to hold their horses, because they had to move these materials, and Luke practically melted after getting praised that hard. And the dismantlers couldn't believe it. Luke had a wolf king that actually listens to him. So once that was settled, they snapped into action, tore into the monsters, and started figuring out the final estimated price. Taichai stood outside, fists clenched, waiting for the dismantling to begin. When it was finally done, the receptionist rushed over, bowed for the delay, and wasted no time listing the costs. She shoved him a pile of bags stuffed with golden coins, telling him the 3 red wolves hit 100,000 shells each. The wildfall cost 130,000, and that platinum golem alone was 3 million, which smashed his total to 3,430,000 shells, and He just couldn't believe it. He was blown away by the money. Now he was swimming in funding, and the receptionist, just out of sheer curiosity, leaned in and asked if he was gearing up to buy equipment or something. Teiichi leaned in and told her the real plan. He's opening a cafe called Cafe Fluffy, ***. When she heard that, her smile lit up and she sighed. What a shame, I can't believe you don't want to be an adventurer. But then her voice warmed. She was relieved a strong tamer like him would be coming to town, and that thought hit like a calm weight in his chest. She told him, just make sure you swing by the Commerce Guild later. When he decided to open his cafe, Taikai took her advice. She waved him goodbye with one promise. She'd come in and visit the moment it opened. Taikai felt relieved hearing that, so he headed back to the Tamers Guild, where Shelty met him and asked if he'd managed to sell the materials. Taikai nodded, saying yes. He said he finally had the money to open the cafe, thanks to Luke's hard work, and next day he was heading straight for the Commerce Guild. But first, he had to hunt down the perfect property. Shelty told him that the Tamers Guild had its own properties too, if he wanted in. And because Tamers get those huge familiars, there are even properties out on the edge of the city. Tekka's ears lit up the moment he heard it. And he asked her if he could take a look at those properties, and Shelty told him to come back tomorrow super early, because she'd prep a few for him. After that, Teiichi bolted to his room, called it a day, and couldn't stop thinking about how much he'd crushed today, at breakneck speed, right before he looked at the properties. He bolted to the equipment store to get what he needed. The dealer greeted him, but he slammed the brakes halfway when he spotted Taikai's familiar face. Teiichi told the seller he could take on the familiar wait outside if it was necessary, but the seller shrugged and said it was all good, so Teiichi thanked him for the thought. He spun around, staring at the awesome gear adventurers and soldiers fight in, and Luke asked, "Why don't you grab one if you like it?" But Teiichi shot back, saying it was too heavy for him, so Luke snapped that he was weak. Then Luke spotted something big and shot out a finger, yelling, "That one." Pechai spotted the light jacket, soft as anything to the touch, and he grabbed it without hesitation, while Luke leaned in and said it looked way better than the plain clothes Pechai was stuck in right now. Teiichi figured if his master was going to want respect, he'd better actually put effort into looking the part, so he bought it for that very reason. Then he walked up to the shopkeeper, and the guy straight up asked if Teiichi was a tamer, because he'd never seen a wolf this huge. Teiichi told him Luke was no ordinary beast. Luke was his important partner. From the way the shopkeeper stared, Luke was instantly clocked as a wolf king, and you don't see that kind of title around these days. Days passed, and Luke's gorgeous coat had him grinning too, so when the praise landed, Luke practically glowed, because compliments were the easiest thing in the world to please him. Since they were already talking about coats, Taikai jumped on the moment and told the shopkeeper he was planning to open a cafe where people could hang out with fluffy monsters, and the shopkeeper's eyes lit up, saying he'd come try it as soon as it opens. Taikai couldn't stop smiling about how it all went. He grabbed a fresh set of normal clothes, headed back to the conversation about the property, and when he finally reached Tamers Guild, everything was on the table. Shelty greeted him with a bright good morning, and Teiichi hurriedly asked if she'd found any places for him. She flashed a grin, and said she'd nailed a perfect spot right near the Tamers Guild. And since it was a bustling spot, it screamed perfect cafe, but Taikai wanted something calmer, so Shelting next steered him to a laid-back area on the city's edge, right near the outer wall. Teiichi tilted his head up and stared at the house map like it was a battlefield plan. He stepped into the house and instantly loved the layout, then spotted the bonus, a real garden and a backyard perfect for training familiars, plus even a well right on the property. Tech thought he'd just struck gold with this property, until Shelty snapped that it was outside the wall, and monsters could come crashing in any moment. Teiichi figured that if a monster ever crashed the scene, Luke would cut right through it without breaking a sweat. So he swore he'd be fine, because Luke was there. Then he demanded they look at the property right now, and Shelty finally agreed to show it. And they led Tachi right up to the place outside the walls. Then the moment he finally got his first look at the property's house, he froze at the backyard, where a well sat waiting. The place looked absolutely unreal. He loved the property at first glance, and Luke. He stepped inside, swept the rooms with his eyes, and confirmed things with Teiichi. Taikai said it was a great property, and he couldn't wait. He offered to show him around the house right now and try to seal the deal. Taikai nodded and stepped inside, and the moment he did, the jaw-dropping design hit him like a wave. Shelting explained why this place was built so professionally. It used to be a restaurant, run by the previous owner, who was also a tamer, and even used his familiars to haul in resources, and Taikai instantly saw that as a huge win. Then Luke stepped back, stared at the empty space in the house, and realized it was way too small for him. Luke grilled Teiichi, asking if a noble Fenrir like him truly could be fine in a tiny place like this. Then Teiichi hit him back with a saying from his world: "Home isn't where you're born, it's where you build it." So he was totally convinced Luke would end up loving it. When word spread that Luke got shy and started nagging Teiichi for being exhausting to be around, Teiichi couldn't help but think of Luke as sun deer, cold on the outside, soft on the inside, because even though Luke isn't really a person, the label still points to him like he's just a son. With that aside handled, Shelty ushered him upstairs to reveal the second floor's living quarters. And Taechai adored that room. It felt like it was made for his bedroom. He glanced at the furniture and shrugged. It looked old, sure, but it was still good enough for him. Then Shelty hit him with the numbers. Living here costs 10,000 shells a month in rent, but if Taechai wanted to buy the place outright, he'd need to be ranked as an e-tamer or higher. Taechai didn't mind renting it for the time being and told her to get the paperwork ready. She practically lit up and got started right away, so everything was suddenly great. And they should race back to the guild to wrap up the last formalities. As they stepped out the door, Taichi whipped around for one last look back. Back at the place as one whole, he finally felt it, like he was one step away from finishing his fluffy cafe. Even with all that left to chase, there was still so much he refused to leave behind. Meanwhile, Amelia the Adventurer Guild receptionist just sat there thinking, because day after day, her job kept throwing one jaw-dropping surprise after another her way. She couldn't believe it. Taechai actually pulled a Wolf King as his familiar, and it screamed talent so loud she knew she had to rush straight to the guild master and tell them. Master, she marched straight to the guild master's office and started pounding on the door right when Taechai showed up. But sadly, she couldn't track her down in the office at that exact moment. Now that the guildmaster was back, she hurriedly spilled every detail and grilled Himiri, asking where she'd been when that high-ranking tamer showed up. Because after hearing about a tamer who could tame a Wolf King, Himiri couldn't help but be stunned. Amelia instantly understood how wild it was to have a tamer this powerful living right in their city, and she proved it. When things got tricky, Himiri was nowhere to be seen. Then Imre snapped that Amelia wasn't cut out to be a guildmaster since she struggled with negotiations, but Amelia refused that story. Himiri's talent was undeniable, since she'd learned magic young and still climbed her way all the way up to guildmaster, earning the legendary title of Adventurer of Wisdom. Even so, Henry insisted she couldn't hack admin work, and Amelia, the receptionist, couldn't believe it, calling it a tragic waste of real talent. Henry even admitted it was wild to have a Wolf King for a familiar, but then Amelia turned the tables. She asked her to go request that man work with the Adventurers Guild, because the monster materials he dropped off the other day were top tier. Henry's face flickered with uncertainty, and annoyance crept in fast as the reality of it hit. She just cut it off and declared the matter was over right there. So when Amelia demanded to know why, Himiri snapped back that she didn't want to ask that guy to come all the way to the Adventurers Guild. The guild keeps pushing him, so if they keep at it, he could end up leading the city, meaning for now they'd better be okay with him just staying in town. And once Amelia agreed with the guild master, she nodded, then turned around and went back to her work. Meanwhile, Emery wasn't fully saying what was on her mind yet, because one fight with a Wolf King had left the memory haunting her for years, a foe so brutal it still scared her, and now she couldn't believe some guy could tame it. So yeah, she figured he must have had a job as wild and unique as hers. And she definitely didn't expect a Wolf King's strong man to stay so stone calm about it, because that was weird as hell. And now she couldn't stop wondering if she'd ever run into him in the city. And if it came to that, she'd rather face him as Himiri the Adventurer, not Himiri the Guildmaster. And as she stared out the window, she just knew they'd click. Now it was back to Taechai, his first day in that new house, grinning because they finally did it and landed him in the place where he'd soon build his dream cafe, and Luke couldn't stop remarking about it, all thanks to the monster she caught. Taechai caught it and shot Luke a grateful nod for the huge help, but Luke instantly told Taechai to stop grabbing him whenever he felt like it. But he secretly loved it until Taechai started sniffing him in a way that felt downright creepy. Taechai told Luke to handle their household stuff first, and Luke shot back, asking if he was planning to buy new items. Tachi said he could buy it, then immediately admitted he wanted to test one of his special skills first. A mysterious skill, creation, sounds like pure luck, and Luke never even heard of something that convenient. Taechai took a breath, hit the trigger on that unique skill, and in an instant, a creation block flashed into his mind like a 3D hologram. Then he started reshaping it however he wanted. Tech pictured a round table for right in the shop's center, low, cat-paw legs and all, and chose a solid, soft wood with that beautiful natural color. Once he was done, he finalized it, and the table materialized right in front of his eyes. Taechai realized this creation skill let him forge anything he could dream up in his mind. Luke's jaw dropped at the fact that skills like that really exist, and right after, Taechai whipped out to tackle the next batch of items, and somehow turned it into a cozy beanbag cushion for Luke to finally kick back and relax. He urged Luke to try it, and Luke hesitated for a split second before placing his paw on the beanbag. And shockingly, he ended up loving it so much that he flopped onto the beanbag, grinning like it was the softest thing ever. Taichi kept hammering away, churning out tables, chairs, and cushions. Then he moved on to shelves and all the other stuff he needed. Things like separations inside cat toys, like those ball compartments and other soft plush pieces. He even installed a cat tower that stretches right across the wall. Then at last, he jammed a spiral staircase right onto the table in the center, and he wrapped up the house plans with curtains on the windows. By the time he was done, the sun was already sliding toward the horizon when it all hit. He'd been so locked in that he totally lost track of time. Then he snapped, calling out Luke and shouting that it was time to leave. Luke didn't want to leave just yet, but Taechai pushed back hard. "We've got to go, or Shalty's going to worry sick." Then he said they'd head to the living room tomorrow and marched right back to face the tamer's guilt. The next day, Taechai stormed in and wrapped up the living room, and Luke couldn't help but feel like it was way too cramped. But he forgave him because the beanbag had finally landed in his favor, and Taechai practically exploded with relief. Luke actually liked it. But then his face snapped from calm to pure confusion, as the memory of one of the most important pieces hit him hard. Even though it was supposed to be a cafe, he pointed out there still wasn't a single signboard up. Luke barely gave it a second thought, until Taechai warned him it mattered, so he snapped into action with creation magic and crafted the cafe's signboard for Fluffy, a cozy healing spot open daily from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Everything was finally falling into place, so Taechai went and added a doorbell, because this laid-back cafe wasn't ready to keep it ringing all day long. Now he had to figure out whether he could kick off a business without permission, so he marched straight to the Commerce Guild and asked Luke what he wanted to do, and Luke snapped back that it was painfully boring to go just to sit through all those explanations. So he just crashed onto the beanbag and zoned out for a nap, and Taechai shrugged like, "Yeah, that's totally fine." So he stormed into the city to handle more errands, headed straight for the Commerce Guild, and the receptionist greeted him with a bright smile before asking why he'd come. Then Taechai stepped up and introduced himself. She listened as he said he'd come for permission to open a cafe where people could hang out with his familiars, and she just couldn't wrap her head around why anyone would want to play with monsters. So Taechai's hopes sank a bit, because it felt like nobody even got what fluffiness was supposed to mean. First, she told them, no matter how monstrous they looked, that they were soft, fluffy, and downright comforting to pet, and the calming feeling was exactly what humans were starving for. The receptionist couldn't stop smiling at the cafe's fluffy idea, and since Taechai was a tamer, there was zero trouble letting him take ownership. She dropped the bombshell that every monster forced into work had to be registered with the Tamers Guild, and Peiki instantly understood why. Then she shot into the taxis, jumping up or down depending on whether the place was a private shop or a commercial one, and even where it sat. And Taechai answered that his was a private shop he was leasing out on the edge of town. She told him that out near the outskirts, those shops only had to pay a 5% tax on total sales, and Taechai couldn't help thinking it was shockingly generous. Now she fired the question at him, when was he finally going to open the cafe? Just like that, Taechai froze, completely speechless. And then it hit him there was still some prep work left to do. The receptionist told him to come back once the date was set, and the second she said it, Taechai sprinted all the way back to his place, blurting to everyone that they'd run straight into a huge problem. Luke demanded to know what kind of problem could be so massive it shattered the peaceful sleep of a lone Fenrir. Taechai shrugged and said they didn't have even enough fluffies to swing the cafe doors open. Luke barely flinched and brushed it off, but Taechai spiraled with worry because this was insanely important. Then Luke leaned in and asked, why not just go tame some monsters, since you're a tamer? So Taechai stormed into the Tamers Guild and grilled Shelty for answers about those fluffy, friendly monsters. Shelty said the Southwest really did have berry rabbits, but only the greenest adventurers dare to chase them, like they're living targets. Taechai thanked her for the info, wasted zero time, and sprinted off to track down Bari Rabbit right then and there. Luke said those berry rabbits were agile monsters, so tell me, how was he even going to catch them? Luke offered to go grab them for him, but the second he pictured Nate Taechai refusing for rabbit safety, it made his stomach drop. Then he caught rustling in the grass, like something was creeping closer. When he peered over, there it was, a cute little fluffy rabbit monster, just oozing charm. Taechai couldn't help but melt at how adorably this monster was, and just from one look, he knew it had to be the berry rabbit, so he stared at the rabbits like they were pure magic. Luke couldn't believe it. Berry rabbits were usually super cautious, yet they marched right up to Taechai anyway. Taechai figured it was his title, the one all fluffies adored, and sure enough, it worked like a charm, so he ended up taming the berry rabbit. After he finally tamed the berry rabbit, Taechai started fantasizing about calling it Marshmallow, since it was white, fluffy, and absolutely adorable. He wondered if his converse skills could help him talk to the Bari rabbits, but Luke shut that down fast. Those rabbits weren't smart enough to speak yet, and only if Taechai stayed patient would they learn to talk later. Taechai burst with joy, wrapped Luke in a hug, and praised him as super intelligent, rubbing that fluffy fur, until Luke snapped, "Stop treating me like this so casually, because. But just as he started, someone cut him off, and Taikai finished the thought, since he was the only Fenma around. Luke burst out laughing and Taichai grinned like, "I've got it memorized. I've carried it so much." Then Taichai's eyes lit up. More berry rabbits were charging straight toward him. So he went down the line, taming them one by one. He took one look and spotted berry rabbits in every color under the sun, then named the white one Monarcha and the brown one Karen. He figured this was the ultimate heaven, being surrounded by those fluffy little creatures. But Luke's nerves flared, and he pressed him hard for exactly how many he planned to tame. Taikai ended up tainting a ton of things, then came marching back to the city with a huge stash of berry rabbits. The guard at the gate stared in shock and blurted, "What's with all the giant berry rabbits?" Taichi just shrugged and said, "I'm a tamer, these are my familiars." So he figured there'd be no trouble at all. He flashed his guild card and the soldier shrugged, saying it was totally fine as long as they were familiar with it. But he couldn't shake one terrifying thought. If the amount of tamed monsters was tied to a skill level, then what happened when that level changed? Taikai never saw that question coming. The soldier's question made total sense, but he couldn't just admit his skills were limitless, so he smirked and claimed he only managed to tame so many because they were tiny, weak little monsters. The soldier clung to his lie with a shaky hesitation, and Taikai snapped back, "That's just how it goes, because we can't even tell what your level really is." The soldier finally realized Taikai had a point, and Taikai slipped out of the questions like it was all part of the plan. He dodged questions at first, but then when he walked up and showed Shelty his 10 berry rabbits, she froze in pure shock, bombarding him with even more questions. After it all finally settled, Luke ordered every single berry rabbit to. Rabbits couldn't touch his beanbag, not even once, so Taichi watched in shock as Luke grabbed it and refused to let go. After the soaking, one more berry rabbit showed up, and the little cuties couldn't get enough of their toys, even swapping them around with everything else. Luke was thrilled, and the berry rabbits were just irresistibly adorable. Now all that stood between him and disaster was the menu. Tea in this world was pure luxury, and he refused to hand out some sloppy, terrible drink just to fill the cup. So for this moment, he decided to break out his next one-of-a-kind skill, by shopping. He even found a way to bargain with the cat god, so it could do his shopping for him, about 5 items at a time. Taichai's eyes snapped open, and right there, a pen and paper appeared in front of him. So he grabbed the powdered censure, crushed it into place, and wrote down what he needed while tossing in grey tea bags, instant coffee, cookies, and chocolates. He slammed through the last item on the list and couldn't shake the question. Did that missing list really reach the cat god? While Taikai waited, he hunkered down and drafted the whole menu for his cafe, kicking things off with green tea, coffee, and black tea, and pairing it with sweet treats like cookies and chocolates. Right then, a bag suddenly plopped down on the table behind him. He unloaded a bill for 2,800 shells, and panic hit as he wondered how on earth he was going to pay it. So he pulled out the money, and the next second it vanished into thin air, and Taichi just thanked the cat god like crazy. Because he could feel it, every step he took, there was always a hand on his back, ready to catch him. From this day on, Taikai moved into the cafe, and Shelty was coming by later. But here's the problem. There wasn't a single bathroom, and in this world only rich families even owned bathtubs. So now Taichai takes Luke in his own hands and drags him into the bath, while Luke fights back, furious at being handled like that, and Taichai scrambles to convince him to calm down. And when Taikai saw the berry rabbits actually splashing and enjoying their bath, he told Luke, "See, they're being good, well, at least compared to you." Luke suddenly turned shy, and he slipped in quietly to get bathed. No matter how much he hated it, he just wouldn't let the newcomers outshine him. Taikai thought that was insanely cute about Luke. After he cleaned up Luke, he started dreaming big. He wanted to build a bathhouse with hot water so he could soak in warmth when the winters rolled in. Then it hit him. Shelty had said that even if he was just renting, he could tweak the place a little and nothing would be a problem. So with his creation skill, Taichi ended up building his own detached bathhouse. Luke asked what it was, and Taichi just smiled and said Luke would love it before stepping inside, where the bathroom was spotless and perfectly organized. It came out just right, exactly how he'd imagined, clean, solid, and working like it should. He still couldn't help wondering what those taps were even hooked up to, but hey, if it worked, that was enough. Then Luke leaned in and asked what he planned to do with all that hot water. Then Taichai brought him to the bathtub first, filled it with steaming hot water and urged him, "Go on, try it." Water, before Luke could even taste it. The berry rabbits swarmed in and that set him off, pure rage boiling up, and launched in immediately, refusing to let them take the lead. Taikai was adored by this very sight. Luke let the scorching hot water wash over him, and pure calm hit so hard it felt like he'd never relaxed like this before. Luke declared that after a bath like that, even a noble Fenrir like him wouldn't let his standards slip. Cold water just didn't feel right anymore, and Taichai was thrilled he was into it. Luke took one look at Taechai and snapped, "You're weird," then demanded, on his own request, that Taechai set up a bath for him every single day, and Taechai couldn't believe Luke was getting this fired up about it. And now, just like that, he slid into the bath too, finally letting himself unwind. But then Lu dropped into Taechai's bath on the spot, furious that he was hogging the bigger tub all to himself. Luke had it way better, and the moment it hit, he offended himself out of pure relaxation, while Taechai figured he was honestly loving every second of it. Now that he's finished his bath, Aichi flung open the cafe doors, grabbed Marshmallow's attention, and declared that he'd be the leader of the Bari Rabbits, telling him to run things the right way, no excuses. Marshmallow stepped up to take charge, and Taechai told everyone, "Go ahead, play with the guests when they arrive, and until then, do whatever you want." 3 hours crawled by, and not a single customer showed up, while the afternoon crept closer and closer. Taechai knew it'd take a while since he didn't really blast the news. He only posted a simple notice around the area, so all he could do was cross his fingers and hope the customers would finally start trickling in. Suddenly, it hit him. This was exactly the kind of thrill the rental caretakers must feel. And right on cue, the doorbell blasted, like Taechai had just landed his very first customers. A trio of adventurers showed up, and Taechai waved them inside, because the lead guy said they'd spotted this place on the way back to town, so they decided to rest. Then, right in the middle of the cafe, the archer girl yanked out her arrow the second she spotted berry rabbits and a wolf. Taechai shot forward to stop her, explaining they were his familiars. Her eyes went wide. She never thought monsters would be hiding in a place like this, and Taechai could totally see why. And she couldn't shake the shock. Why were familiars even showing up in a cafe? Taechai pointed out that this cafe was a fluffy little hangout spot where customers could meet up and swap laughs with adorable, cuddly monsters. He walked in, introduced himself, and said he'd just opened today. So yeah, these were his very first customers. The archer's eyes lit up. She couldn't believe it. And then she introduced herself with pride as Nina the hunter. And the other guy, he looked grim. And then at the very end, Aries appeared. Taechai told everyone they could grab their orders and pay right at the counter. But then he dropped the catch. There was a strict 1 drink per person limit right now. While they were waiting for orders, they could roam, mess with the monsters, and the seating was totally free. So Nina jumped at the offer. As she placed the order, she leaned in and asked, "So what's the difference between tea and black tea?" Taechai just nodded and answered, "Tea," like it was no big deal. Because in his hometown, green tea was the everyday go-to, and once he served it, it felt refreshingly perfect. Grizz and Nana decided to take the plunge and try the iced tea. Then Nina leaned in and asked what Aries ordered. Aries just said, "Black tea." And just like that, T and Nina said they'd grab some chocolates and cookies too. Taechai didn't even hesitate. He slapped on 700 shells for every drink, charged 300 for the sweets, and when the dust settled, the whole bill came to around 2,700 shells. He told them to get comfortable while they waited for orders, and Gris, Nana, and Aries each grabbed their own spot, while Nana leaned in, eyes sparkling at the berry rabbits. Because she used to hunt monsters down, seeing them like this finally hit Gris with a realization. Put monster aside, and they're totally adorable, like little animals. Gris was just as curious about that giant wolf, but Luke's presence made his instincts scream. And right then Marshmallow trotted up to Nina. She cringed in total awkward silence because guilt crushed her. She'd pointed her bow at it earlier, and when she didn't know what else to do, she patted Marshmallow. Meanwhile, Grizz teamed up with another berry rabbit and beamed as he cradled it, because small animals usually bolt the second they spot him. Nina just grinned and said he was a total softie at heart. Then Ari cut in, and Grizz was totally overreacting. Grizz insisted it was fine. Like this kind of moment wasn't something he practically never got to experience. Nina then nudged Aries and asked if she wasn't interested in playing with the berry rabbits, but Aries snapped no. She said she only needed a cup of tea and some rest. Soon, Taechai slammed the order down. A pile of chocolates and cookies hit the table too, 2 iced teas and 1 strong black tea. Nana said their order looked awesome. Grizz had never once tried a green drink before, and then they went one by one, tasting it together. Everyone stared at the tea like it was too smooth to be real, and those cookies paired with it perfectly, like heaven in a bite. Gris didn't trust his eyes and fully believed the price had to be wrong by a number, but Taechai just calmly insisted the prices were exactly right. And when he saw they loved them, relief hit him hard. Then he promised, "You can have more anytime you want." While Aries kicked back and savored her black tea, time ticked on. A berry rabbit suddenly hopped up to Aries, and it completely caught her off guard. Harry scanned the area, making sure no one was watching. Then she reached out and gave the adorable berry rabbit a gentle pat. She couldn't stop admiring just how soft it felt, but she was so painfully shy that she couldn't bring herself to be soft-hearted. Aries smirked and said she was only letting the berry rabbit use her lap, while no one was looking. Taikai noticed the customer was absolutely thrilled with the service. I can't believe they somehow never crossed paths with the fluffs of this world. So yeah, he figured they'd finally kick back and relax even more once they had meals thrown in too. But he couldn't shake his worry. He wasn't a great cook, and with work taking over his days, he basically lived off convenience store meals. Tech figured, let's try something simple. Then his thoughts spiraled. Could he use the shopping skill to grab packaged food from the shelves? He also decided to swing by town to hunt for some great ingredients. And later, Taikai wandered the market, spotting shop after shop packed with fresh vegetables and all sorts of goodies. He decided to use his shopping skill to plead with the cat gods for rice, because this market had none, until Luke snapped, saying he was starving and ordering Taichai to grab some meat skewers from the food shop that was cooking them fresh. And Taichai figured he might as well try too since hunger was hitting hard. So he grabbed meat for himself, and Luke hit him with a demand, telling him to snag some for him too. Taikai grabbed one meat stick for Luke too, and said it was seriously tasty. So Luke leaned in and told him that the food he made was way better. And it finally hit him with a realization he'd never seen coming before. Luke leaned in and demanded Taichai whip up another dragon steak for him. And right now, he grabbed some ingredients and stuffed them into his magic bag for safekeeping. But right then Luke snapped to it. Someone was there, and a person walked up, practically beaming, saying it was awesome to see such a huge dog. Turns out it's Himiri, and she practically walks right up, introduces herself and fires off a question. So is that your familiar? Taichai glances at her and realizes she looks like she's still in high school, but he doesn't flinch. He gives his name properly. I'm Taichai Tamer. Then he clears it up. This dog isn't a dog at all, it's a wolf, and its name is Luke, his familiar. Mary asked if I could pet him, but when Taichai checked on Luke, Luke snapped, refusing a girl who called him dog and basically made it crystal clear. No pets were happening. Taikai just shrugged and apologized. That's how it is. Imuri smiled like it was nothing at all, and the tension instantly melted away. She heard those familiars could get rough, so she refused to push her luck and wouldn't burden anyone. Taichai leaned in and asked if she wanted to pet something fluffy. She could swing by his cafe, meet those berry rabbits, and cuddle them to her heart's content, because he was sure she'd love playing with them too. Himari's jaw dropped when she learned Taikai was the one running the fluffy little cafe she'd been talking about, because the receptionist told her Ignilia. She tailed Luke straight into the cafe, then gasped when it finally looked cozy and homey instead of anything shady. She got completely swept up by the cafe's calm, soothing vibe. She couldn't help it. She loved chasing after the berry rabbits and playing with them like they were her sweetest little friends. Taikai watched the rabbits and prayed Luke could be just as friendly as them. After counting the familiars, Himiri froze in shock, 11 of them, and Taikai had to be loaded with more, which was downright insane. Then Taikai just laughed it off. She pointed out this shop still looked closed, and I swear my heart sank. So was it even okay for her to be here? Taikai just smiled and said, yeah, it's fine. And honestly, not many folks were dying to pet monsters. So if you keep welcoming the fluffy lovers in here, even when time's tight. He clocked how weird it might have sounded, so he swore he didn't bring her here for any shady reason. And then I laughed hard and told him he was hilarious. She brushed it off, I'm fine, because she was stronger than she looked, and as she pulled out her wand, Taikai's instincts screamed *mage. Right on cue, Himiri flashed a friendly intro as an adventurer, while quietly keeping her real identity as Guildmaster Berid. Then it hit him by inviting her out of nowhere. He'd probably robbed her of breakfast, and when he asked, she agreed, right on the spot. After Taikai told her to hold on while he grabbed something simple, she kicked back and played with the Bari rabbits, so Hamri took him up on it. Taichai stormed into the kitchen, using his shopping skills to grab the ingredients for pasta with Italian dressing, then fired off creation magic to forge his own calf-ready tableware. Now he tossed the pasta into boiling water, warmed the meat sauce until it simmered, and plated the salad in a fancy dish. Then he couldn't help smiling because this place was really starting to feel more like a cafe. After a brief wait, he burst out with the order and said she was having an absolute blast. Hanmarie was certain she loved playing with fluffy berry rabbits. Those little guys were so soft and stunningly furred that every time she had to blast them with magic on missions, guilt hit her hard. Taichai showed up, dropped the order on her, and told her to dig in before it turned cold. He only wanted her to enjoy it, and Himari was absolutely buzzing to try it. The moment she took one bite, her eyes lit up, and she blurted, "That's insanely delicious." Taikai shrugged it off like, "It's nothing special, just standard pasta." Himiri raved that the pasta stayed firm and the sauce hit so rich, Taikai couldn't help but soak up the compliment as she thanked her, eyes bright, relieved she'd truly liked it. And he said he'd really been thinking about putting that pasta on the menu. Mary lit up, calling it totally awesome, praising the gorgeous, top-notch tableware, and swearing it would blow up with everyone. Taichai nodded at the feedback, and then, right near her feet, berry rabbits hopped in as if they heard the call. Amiri asked them to try some too, but Taikai snapped, stopping her cold and warning her not to feed them. He hauled the food for the berry rabbits, and the moment they locked eyes with him, those adorable little faces, he knew he'd won them over. Taikai treasured it so much it felt downright unfair, so I grilled him. Tell me, did you berry rabbits eat strawberries for breakfast? He just nodded, then spun around and started feeding the berry rabbits, and I caught myself staring as he set the food down. Then boom, every single berry rabbit bolted toward the food like it was calling their names. Food hit the table and everybody was locked in, like they couldn't even blink. The berry rabbits looked ridiculously cute while they munched, and it drove him crazy trying not to stare. Taikai even said he's never tired of watching them like this. In that one relaxed breath, Emiri suddenly realized she'd been completely hooked by the berry rabbits. She couldn't believe she was this obsessed with the berry rabbits, and that's when it hit her, just how insanely fluffy they really were. Taikai totally understood what she felt, because he'd been hit with the same thing a few times at the cat cafes, juggling non-stop overwork, and still sprinting in to feed those adorable cats just to see them react. After they'd finally stuffed their faces, the berry rabbits sprawled to rest, and Henry swore he'd come back next time as a customer. Henry's words lit him up inside, and he eagerly told her she could drop by anytime to soak in all that soft, fluffy joy. Then she leaned in and asked how much the meal cost. Teji just shrugged and told her the feedback was all the payment he needed. Hi Mary flashed a warm smile and promised to rush in and help whenever trouble found him. Because she wasn't just brave, she was a powerful adventurer. Taichai let out a breath of relief and swore he'd ask for help next time. Then Hamiri nodded hard, promised she would, and hurried off on her way. Take care of yourself, she said, and just like that, Taichai was back on the job again. He started by tweaking the menu, then slammed in a pasta set topped with rich meat sauce. Next, he raided the supplies to restock everything he'd need to cook again. Then Luke rolled up to Taki and begged him to cook up a dragon steak just for him. Taichai felt his chest tighten with awe when Luke asked for something, looking as shy as a whisper. Luke bristled at being treated like that and snapped at Taichai not to insult him, and Taichai got it. Luke was probably hungry after seeing Himiri chow down on pasta earlier. And then it hit Mary. Luke might have been feeling alone, like she was the only one he was really seeing. After that, Cafe Fluffy finally caught a few quiet, peaceful days. Customers actually showed up and the stress stopped. Among the crowd, a merchant became a loyal regular. He always begged to meet the whiteberry rabbit, Manaka, so he ordered a green tea and pasta. Still relaxed to the bone, he couldn't help grinning at the Manaka like it was pure joy. Then Tai Kai finally clocked it. Most berry rabbits were huddled around the merchant, so many it barely ever happened, so Tai Kai stepped in with the order, thanked him for waiting, and the merchant just stared back like, I don't even know why they're swarming me. He was so ticklish it felt like his soul was about to leave his body for a sacred, final death. Then right then, the teacher spotted something strange. He pointed at the thing and demanded to know if the merchant had anything tucked in his chest pocket. Then the merchant grinned and admitted he was carrying prototype cookies. And just like that, the berry rabbits showed up with proof that cookies were real, and they pounced straight on him. He froze in shock, and the merchant nearly jumped out of his skin. And Teji told him feeding the fluffs outside food was against the rules, and the merchant shot back an apology, saying he didn't mean it. The merchant was so hyped up by the berry rabbits crawling on him that he couldn't stop feeling way too good. And to stop everything from getting worse, he snatched every last cookie and devoured them all himself. He vanished, leaving the berry rabbits totally frozen in their tracks. Taichai leaned in and asked them, Are you seriously that hungry? Rage boiled in him and he decided he'd whip up some snacks for them, maybe even Luke, real soon. He watched that poor merchant stare as every rabbit slipped away, and it crushed him into heartbreak. Right after Taichai slammed the shop shut, then he sat down with Luke and laid out how he could level up his situation and make things better for the berry rabbits too. Luke loved pushing himself to make things better for everyone, but he made it crystal clear that what mattered most to them was the food they eat and the environment where they train. And honestly, Luke couldn't help gushing that the beanbag was the best. Taki absolutely adored that adorable little scene. Then he stared at Bari and the rabbits, weighing the question in his head, should he take them outside to get them moving? But the berry rabbits started hopping around like, see, we're totally good, nothing happened, we're just fine inside. Taich pitched Luke the idea of running around in the backyard, but Luke shot it down fast, saying a yard that small would never satisfy him, because he'd way rather go hunting when the moment hits. As he pictured exactly what that mindset would feel like, Taikai finally cleared his schedule for Luke, because from here on out, Luke was getting his time. And just like that, Luke crashed into bed to gear up for his workout later, while Taki decided the real mission was simple: get food taken care of first. He started whipping up a wild creation with strawberries and carrots. Then he finally spotted the problem. he'd run out of ingredients, and the moonflower he needed was missing, and decided to sprint straight to the Tamers Guild to get answers. So he headed to the guild, and Shelty greeted him with worry in her eyes because he hadn't been showing up often. She clocked it instantly. Taichai didn't show up with a single tamed monster today. Then Taichai pulled a full-on jump scare move. Luke was right behind him the whole time. But Shelty couldn't help herself. She had to ask about berry rabbits, because Taichai totally shocked her by showing up with 10 of them all at once. Taikai peppered her with questions about getting moonflowers, and then Shelty flipped open a book to show him exactly what one looked like. And it could only be collected at midnight, when the moon was blazing in the sky. Taichi's stomach dropped when she said that. Then she quickly added that he could grab them at the market too. She said you could buy them at magic stores, and the closest one was only a 5-minute walk away. So Taichi all but forgot he was trapped in a whole new world, because of course there would be magic stores. Shelty leaned in and asked if he was planning to cook something with them, because that ingredient was so rare, it almost never showed up in the hands of tamers or cafes. Taich told her he was thinking about making snacks for his family, and that immediately reminded her, Taichi's got serious cooking skills. A sharp jealousy strung her as she watched moonflowers get turned into ingredients. Taikai sprinted to the magic stores right after he thanked Shelty for the help. Taichai sprinted straight to the magic store in no time, and spotted this huge store that screamed, nobles only, like regular people weren't even supposed to step inside. He wasn't sure Luke would let him in with him, but Luke hated the thought of standing around outside the store. Then boom, Himari burst in and greeted Taikai like she owned the moment. She leaned in and demanded to know why he was showing up in the magic store. Then Taichai leaned in and told her the whole situation. Hima told her she could stay right here with Luke, and yeah, he thought it might help, but he still didn't want to burden her. Hymeria waved it off like, it's all good, because he'd taken care of her the other day, and now she was ready to return the favor. So she grabbed that offer and took it, right there. But Luke was absolutely furious about it. Taichai told him to stay here for a little while, and even promised him a bigger beanbag as a reward. Luke swallowed that idea and figured, yeah, there was nothing he could do about it. He chased after it, swearing he'd be back in a flash, and Himari called out for him to slow down once he got there. Taikai stepped into the magic shop, and immediately got hit with wall-to-wall potions and tools, packed shoulder to shoulder with other shoppers. So he steadied his nerves, refusing to lose focus, because he wouldn't keep Luke and Himari waiting too long. He scanned the price tags on all those magic grasses, and every single one hovered around 1,000 shells. And then at last, tracked down the moonflower with. They charged 10,000 shells for each bundle, and somehow he still decided it wasn't all that bad, and started wondering, how many cookies could we slam out from just one bag of flour? He bolted out of the magic store right after he bought them, and the second he turned, he spotted Luke's intimidating face, so close it made his stomach drop. He rushed to her, apologized for keeping her waiting, and asked, voice tense, if everything was truly okay. I told her it was all fine because Luke was such a good boy, but Luke hated how everyone kept praising him like that. Now it was time for Taichai to head home, and Himari tagged along to watch him whip up the treats. Then, later at this house, Taichai lined up all the ingredients, and he fired up his cooking skills, crafting those treats like pure magic. In the end, he cranked out a whole batch of cookies and stuffed them into tiny bags, one after another. He tallied everything, double-checking the production costs and the exact amount they cranked out. He couldn't stop smiling. 70 bags of cookies were made from all those ingredients, so now he's gonna slap on a price of 40 to 50 shells per bag just to claw back the cost. He told Henry he was about to hand cookies to Bari rabbits, and Henry lit up with pure joy. She couldn't wait to be the one to deliver them. But the moment she shoved that cookie aside, cookie, nah, she grabbed one cookie and ate it herself, leading Taichi to blurt out, why would you do that? And the real reason hit her like a punch. She couldn't resist herself. And those cookies tasted so insanely good that Taichi couldn't resist. He had to try them himself too. Then just like that, the berry rabbits came sprinting in, desperate to snatch a taste too. I'm honestly blown away. Everyone's betting she'll make the delivery for sure. Then Taichai heard Luke charges in, tracking the scent like it's pulling him straight to the source, and begged Lu to save him a few cookies, only to find Taki forgot to whip up any snacks for him. As Himari offered Luke some too, Luke nodded back in a panicked, awkward hurry. And he said, for now, I'll just deal with it using cookies, because that's what his subordinates were already chewing on anyway. Taichai clocked it right away. Luke wasn't being rude, he was probably just shy, because being alone for so long would make anyone struggle with folks like Himari. Taichai flashed a grin, promised Himari he'd hand Luke the cookies himself, then told her to go manage the berry rabbits. Taichai leaned in and told Luke the cookies were packed with carrots, strawberries and moonflower. Then Luke shot back, okay, but where's the meat? But the second he took a bite of those cookies, his ears shot upright like he'd just heard a secret. Luke and Up admitted those cookies weren't half bad, and Tekai felt this huge rush of relief. Turns out he really liked them. Luke dug in for more cookies, and Tekai shot back that piling on too many would make him sick. But Luke figured it was fine. Since he was a noble Fenrir, exercise would cover it, so Tekai had no choice but to back down. But Luke was so fired up, he pressed his mouth right over Taikai's hand. Meanwhile, Hmura hurried to grab cookies for the berry rabbits, and she'd get totally flooded with emotion at the cuteness, then toss them one cookie like it was magic every single time. Every single berry rabbit would tear into a battle. Whoever got the cookie first would have to survive the fight. The other Gary rabbits would stare at her, hungry for what came next. And Hamiri just couldn't look away. Those adorable eyes stared at her, and she was done for. Taichai and Hamiri totally loved feeding cookies to the fluffies, like it was the best time ever. After that, Taikai flipped the menu later and made it official. Pay 300 shells to grab a full bag of bunny cookies. The very next day, Aries, Grizz, and Nina's adventure crew rolled up to a cafe. Then Grizz spotted the brand new menu, and there they were, bunny cookies calling his name. Taich lit up with pride and told him, "Now we can feed the berry rabbits cookies too." So Grizz and Nina hurriedly grabbed one shared bag, and Aries was totally good with black tea for now. And when Nina pushed her to try, Aries brushed it off and said, "I'm totally fine, go ahead, I'll do it too." No matter what Aries claims, she still barrels right along with them to the cafe every single time. Taichai had warned Gris ahead of time that the berry rabbits were going to ram him headfirst for the cookies, but he never expected them to swarm him with ruthless speed and smother him in an instant. And then they laughed at him because his feeding session was over way too fast. She's going to love handing out one cookie at a time. Aries stared as they tossed berries to the rabbits. And just a few days later, Taikai spotted Aries sliding into the cafe. Alone, no backup, no excuses. She insisted on having a calm, cozy tea time, and swore she had no hidden motives at all, just not an excuse to go pet the rabbits. She ordered the usual black tea and chocolates, and since the place was empty, her nerves finally eased. She settled in with a book, stealing glances at the berry rabbits. And then Sin Taichai stormed in, bringing her order with her. She popped the chocolates in first, then took her usual black tea, and when that amazing aroma hit her nose, curiosity surged as she leaned toward Taichai and asked where he'd gotten it from. Taichai shot out an apology, then explained he'd gotten it through a friend's contact. Ari realized she couldn't spill that, so she shot him an apology, said sorry for the hassle, and hurried back to her tea like nothing happened. Then Taichai snatched up the brown berry rabbit. Then he put her on Aries' lap, and she jolted in shock, swearing she only came here to read. Taichai reassured her, brushed off her worries, and even told her the brown berry rabbit's name, Choco. Aries stumbled on a shocking twist. Her name matched the chocolate she craves. She let out this small, unaware smile, like she couldn't help but enjoy every second of it. Taichai clocked it instantly and stepped back, giving her some real privacy. Aries clocked it too. Taikai had to notice how she absolutely hated being watched by everyone. She padded toward Choco, soft steps closing the distance. Then she started wondering if anyone else feels this amazing too, until Choco suddenly startled her by licking her finger. And then she figured it had to be the chocolatey smell. She must have eaten there earlier, so next time she decided to try feeding it cookies. Once closing time hit, Taikai locked up the store and beamed. His brand new treats had everyone coming back for more. Luke snapped him back to the plan, time to work out, and Taikai reluctantly gave in and agreed to go. But only moments later, regret slammed into him hard, because Luke was moving way too fast for him to even keep up. Luke snapped back that he'd promised to do it right, and Taichai realized, way too late, he never imagined it would hit this hard. He couldn't ignore it. Luke was insanely happy at this very moment, so he won't hesitate for a second. Then Luke spotted a dragon right in front of them. He pushed through the chaos and made his move, demanding that he get dragon steak back again. Taichai's jaw dropped at the dragon's massive size, and he blurted out to Luke, "You're seriously trying to kill that thing?" Luke just smirked. "It looks tasty, so why wouldn't I?" Then he ordered Taichai to hold on tight while he went off to slay the dragon. Luke snapped into hunting mode and hurled a moonlit wind slash straight for the dragon's neck. Taichai got so completely derailed by the name of that technique. When Luke sliced the dragon's head clean off without breaking a sweat, he missed that moment. Taichai realized, again, that he was wildly lucky to have finally tamed Luke. Luke raced up to Taichai and demanded a dragon steak, so Taichai set to work and whipped it up. Luke devoured the tasty meat, loving every bite, then leaned in and asked if humans can eat dragon meat too. Taikai shrugged and said, "Sure, because that dragon meat wasn't just food, it was top tier, insanely high quality for humans." Taikai took a try in that moment, and the second that luxurious steak hit his tongue, his eyes flared with pure, delicious excitement. And he practically blurted that Luke was stronger than he'd ever imagined. So yeah, he was thrilled Luke was his first real partner in this world, and now he was even right there with him at the cafe. Luke spun around, cheeks burning, too shy to meet anyone's eyes. And he swore he only claimed that cafe as his territory, because that beanbag was just too good. Petrie could tell Luke was freaking out, just from the way his tail wouldn't stop wagging. Then they tore into that steak together, and kept eating it for a while. Little did they know that, soon, a terrifying beast would come for them. It all kicked off when Henry swung by the cafe one day, exhausted to the core, her eyes barely managing to stay open. Taechai grabbed her order for cookies and a steaming cup of hot black tea. But the moment he brought the order, he spotted Himiri already passed out from exhaustion, so he whipped up a blanket using his creation magic and pulled it over her, letting her sleep as long as she wanted. She jolted awake out of nowhere, and he greeted her with a bright, teasing smile. Himiri smiled and thanked him for letting her crash and finally get some sleep. She finally asked, "So how long were you out for?" And he shrugged back, "About 2 hours, give or take." I flinched so hard because she said she'd just take a quick break, then she fell asleep for real. Taechai shoved a piece of chocolate into her hands, melting the tension like it was nothing. She bolted off right after that, clearly late for something, and Tech couldn't shake the feeling she'd been hit with a brutal schedule. After a few hours, the regular adventurers finally showed up by evening and grilled Taechai, asking if he was shutting down. Teiichi told them closing was still 30 minutes away. Then, once the countdown started, they wasted no time diving into a fast, hyped match with the Bari rabbits. Taikai leaned in and asked them straight up if the adventurers were up to something. Since the mage he counted on looked more wiped out than ever, Gryzen Ninus couldn't hide his worry. They told Keiki that a Cerberus, over 3 meters tall, had just shown up in the forest nearby. Taechai didn't even blink at it. After all, he'd already met a Fenrir once before. But Grizz and Nina burst in and begged him to understand. Cerberus showing up was a total game changer, and they even told a terrifying legend. One Cerberus once destroyed an entire city just by sneezing, so yeah, disaster-level monster. Taechai froze in terror the moment he realized what was coming, and his mind raced with one nightmare. What if that monster crashes down on the city? Now he finally understands just how deadly this threat really is. She told him that Sayura's didn't look like he'd budge from the ruins, and then her stomach dropped when she realized she'd just handed out confidential info. "Keep your mouth shut," she begged, and Teiichi snapped back. "Don't go tossing top-secret details around like it's nothing." She told them straight up why the Adventurers Guild kept this secret locked down. If it leaked, it would spark a full-blown panic, and that chaos could crawl into neighboring countries too. And now, Teiichi finally understood why Himiri looked so exhausted. Gris said they'd never actually seen the Cerberus, but they could feel its crushing pressure in the air, and they finally understood why they couldn't beat it. But no matter what, they can't just shrug it off forever. So right now the guild is assembling a strike team of top-tier adventurers, and they're doing it over the next few days. Then Gris clocked the time and realized they were already running late, but Nina refused to take the lead. She was just too wiped out. So Taikai stepped in and begged them to stay, because dinner was about to happen. Dinner because he wanted to repay adventurers like you, so folks like Grizz's party could live in peace. And Grizz and everyone with him thanked Taikai for his generosity. And in that extra time, they seized every moment to pet even more bunny rabbits. Nana hurled the ball across the room, and Monarca sprinted back with it like a pro. While Grizz was having a blast with one of the berry rabbits perched on his lap, these little monsters kept clinging to him more and more. And just like that, Tachi swooped in and slammed the dinner down in front of everyone. Served them sizzling dragon steak, creamy corn potage soup, a crisp salad, and fluffy bread that melted in your hands. The second Luke caught the scent of dragon meat, he bolted upright like it was calling his name. And he immediately tore into his dinner. Then Luke stared in shock at the first time he'd ever seen Luke get fed right there in front of him. He stepped in, and right past that, he and everyone else couldn't stop themselves from diving into that wildly flashy, extravagant-looking steak. They grilled him about what kind of meat this was, but Taikai couldn't just blurt out that it was dragon meat. They took a bite of that meat and swore they'd never tasted a steak this good before, and even the bread was so fluffy, it felt like it melted in their mouths. Taikai smiled seeing everyone enjoy the dinner, then they wrapped it up with tea, and finally, off they went. Luke cornered Tuohi and asked if they were leaving, and when Tuohi nodded, Luke told Taikai they should go work out, only for Taikai to panic and insist they'd better not step outside. He shoved him out fast, because Cerberus was a real threat right now, and Luke snapped at Taikai for being dumb enough to think a Cerberus could ever stand a chance against him. Taikai, and then, without wasting a second, he hauled him outside to show him exactly what he could do. Taikai demanded to know if Luke was truly certain, and Luke grinned back that Cerberus would be a total breeze for him. Later, Luke suddenly felt Cerberus closing in. and told Takia he was heading the right way. Then Takia snapped, "How do you know?" Luke claimed he was so strong he could feel Cerberus' presence coming. Taikai warned that adventurers could be lurking out there, so they had to steer clear. Luke immediately understood what he meant. He meant it, and he stashed Taikai Suma away in secret. And he drove his finger toward the nearest adventurers, like he already knew exactly where they'd be. Luke didn't care at all whether these adventurers watching could see him go toe-to-toe with the Cerberus. So he stormed straight in and bellowed at the top of his lungs, daring the Cerberus to come out. Right on cue, exactly like he'd predicted. Then Cerberus finally burst out, and just like the old legends promised, it snapped up with 3 heads. The Cerberus erupted in fury, every bit as ferocious as they swore it was. And Taikai was dead certain this was even scarier than that dragon from before. Luke charged straight at Cerberus, fear nowhere in sight, while Taikai watched the adventurers rush to the guild, desperate to report it right away. Then the Cerberus surged forward, blasting magic spheres at Lu, and Lu just barely dodged them by springing into the air. It lunged in, moonlit claws slashing, and the Cerberus got blasted away, but it wasn't anywhere near finished. Taikai couldn't shake her worry for Luke. Cerberus looked way stronger than anyone expected, and he started asking, if we beat it, what then? He doesn't think they can even eat it, but then on closer look, Taikai spotted that surprise creature's fur, and it looked unbelievably fluffy, so he shot his hand forward, and instantly teamed up. Then Luke's rage surged the moment Tachi stepped in his way. Taikai shot back an apology, admitting, I couldn't stop it. Then out of nowhere, Cerberus started barking, and the sound hit like a warning. Then the monstrous Cerberus shrank, right in front of Taikai, into a cuddly 3-headed puppy, and it yapped, Taikai, you're our master, begging him to chase them. Taichi carefully grabbed the Cerberus, and suddenly it hit him. He could actually understand what it was saying. So yeah, he finally broke it in and tamed it for good. Taichi felt this warm, fluffy rush so strong it was like he was about to float straight up to the heavens. Then the 3 heads of Cerberus demanded names, and Taikai immediately started naming them from the left. It split left to right. Left was Null, the middle was Pino, and the right side landed on Chloro. Taikai snatched them up, and couldn't help but gush over how tiny and fluffy they'd gotten compared to before. Pino insisted this way was way better, because it let them stay close to Taikai. Then Taikai spotted the injuries they'd taken. So first, he hit them with healing magic, only it would work on his tamed monsters. The Sugarist was grinning after the healing, and they even told Taikai he was cool, but Luke couldn't hide his disappointment, because the damage he'd done got fixed way too fast. Tachi finally felt the pain fade, and Cerberus too started to feel better for real. Taikai clung to him for no reason other than, I'm cute. Then Luke snapped, saying they had to move, because the adventurers from before could wake up any second, and Taikai remembered exactly how they'd collapsed into unconsciousness during the fight. So he hauled those adventurers to safety first. After that, Taikai couldn't help but stare at Cerberus, wondering what in the world he was supposed to do next. The very next day, Tachi jolted awake. He looked up and found Cerberus sprawled out, sound asleep right beside him. He remembered hauling them home earlier, and when he spun around and scanned the room, he spotted Luke. Luke and Bari Rabbit sprawled out on their bean bags, all comfy and asleep, while Luke's jaw dropped at the sight of so many fluffs catching Z's so early in the morning. And the moment he woke up, he had a ton of questions for Cerberus, starting with one burning one. Why the heck was it at the ruins? He still remembers when the Cerberus promised they wouldn't be lonely anymore, so you know it had to be brutal for them, living alone like that for so long. He tiptoed toward Cerberus, then spotted one of the 3 snarling beasts waking up. He apologized for waking him up, and that's when Taikai realized only Noel had stirred while the other head stayed asleep. Noel told him that sure, they share just one body, but each head runs its own mind, separate and alive. Then Taikai asked Noel if it was really okay for him to drag them here, and Noel just nodded, saying it was totally fine. Because they kept dodging humans, no matter where they fled, humans always came hunting, so he said those ruins were their latest hiding spot, which made Taichi breathe out in relief, because he could tame them, and that's exactly how he helped them. On the right, the other head, Chloro, woke up too, and said he finally felt right at home, admitting he'd always wanted to meet good humans like Taichi. Taichi couldn't help but feel crushed for everything they'd endured, and once he listened to their story he was relieved, because somehow he'd still managed to meet Cerberus. He hauled himself up, swore he'd protect them no matter what, and told the servers to hold up while he carried their breakfast over. After a while, he cracked open the cafe doors, and his first customers were grinning guests from his party, all of them wiped out from being yanked into an emergency call this morning. They swung by real quick just to catch a glimpse of the fluffies in Taichi, and Taichi noticed something, a familiar resemblance to his own past work, because even back then, he'd get called in early for it too. He told Gris and the others, "You're regulars, so I'll hook you up free bunny cookies for the berry rabbits." The second it landed, their tired faces lit up with fresh energy as they cheered. And Taechai dropped the bombshell. Starting today, they've got a brand new family member too. Gris practically burst with excitement, but then Taechai shouted Pino, Chloro, and the adventurers stood frozen, completely stunned, like the world had just gone silent around them. They rushed in and started scrutinizing the three-headed beast, whispering to each other that it looked exactly like Cerberus, but something about this place made it hard to be sure. They even heard the rumors. Cerberus vanished out of the ruins out of nowhere, and people swore it tangled with a huge wolf-like monster. Gris told them that guild research points to Cerberus possibly being slain, so that means this dog had to be one of its pups. Harry's last thought hit like a punch. Cerberus had to have sacrificed his own life to keep his kid safe, and everyone else nodded along, swearing it had to have gone down exactly that way. And Gris finally admitted that Taechai probably just stumbled by and somehow ended up taming a Cerberus, without even realizing it was just a pup. Naina admitted Taechai was a total mystery, because he somehow had a whole swarm of familiars. Years passed, but in the end they realized it was no big deal. Taechai finally brought it under control, so there was nothing more they could do. Taechai leaned in and asked if their talk was done, and they all nodded. Yeah, it was finished. Then Taechai sprinted in with food for Luke, Cerberus, and everyone else. He dished out food for Luke and Cerberus, while the adventurers took care of feeding the berry rabbits. With one more member joining the family, Cafe Fluffy stayed just as peaceful as ever. While Himari, the guildmaster, prowled through the forest, scanning every shadow for where Cerberus had vanished to, other adventurers kept pressing her. Surely it was dead, right? But she refused to swallow that thought because she still needed to see it with her own eyes. But now it was time to turn back, and Himari just couldn't help herself, so she took a wild detour on the way. Right as she was making her way, she stumbled into a whole swarm of orcs, and the moment they spotted her, they zeroed in like predators. They made it painfully clear they wanted to hit her the moment the chance showed up. Himari had zero time to spare. She knew the only cure left was feeding the berry rabbits. So she whipped out her cyclone magic and unleashed it fast, to obliterate those orcs in a heartbeat and get out of here before we waste a single second. Once she dealt with them, she tossed out a little salt and wished, of all things, that these monsters were at least as cute as the berry rabbits. So she headed back toward the cafe, and when she finally arrived, she lit up the place and greeted Taechai like she'd been waiting the whole time. Taechai said she must have been swamped, and she shot back that she already handled her work, so now she was here to have fun with the berry rabbits. But she totally got thrown off when she spotted a surferist right here in Cafe Fluffy. And when Taechai caught her standing there, utterly frozen, he leaned in and blurted, "What's wrong?" He filled her in on the new arrivals at Cafe Fluffy, Pino and Chloro Knoll, and begged that she'd hit it off with them. But she was so stunned she couldn't even get a single word out. Taechai leaned in and asked what she wanted, and she immediately ordered a black tea. While Teji sprinted off to grab the order, Himari couldn't shake the idea that the only monster with 3 heads and 1 body was a Cerberus. No matter how she looked at it, a surgeon was now sitting in the cafe, and the moment it hit, her curiosity flared because she was kind of excited to meet him. She slid into a seat with nerves on full blast, then cautiously reached out to pet the Cerberus's fur. She couldn't take her eyes off Cerberus' fluffy fur, and just stared at him like that. She remembered hearing that some monsters could shrink and swell once they were tamed, and she couldn't wait to see one for herself. And yeah, this wasn't some cute berry rabbit situation. A Cerberus was on a whole different battlefield, so an ordinary tamer could never tame a disaster-grade monster, which basically screams that Taechai might be one of the best tamers alive. But then again, who Taechai really is, no one had a clue. She spotted him staring back at her from right there. Then he flashed a smile and spun around, right as he caught sight of Luke. He handed him the black tea, Mary, like it was the start of something important, and she decided she couldn't let the cafe vanish. So she snapped into action, using her power as guildmaster to back Taechai up behind the scenes in case trouble ever came for him. Next day, right as the cafe shut its doors, Luke and the crew yanked Taki awake for a proper meal, while Taechai drifted into a daydream, convinced he'd win over the Fluffies and become popular. Luke snapped with rage and drove his weight into Taechai, forcing him to scramble up immediately. After he served them their meals, Taechai stared at the quiet and wondered what to do next. Because it hit him, he'd been living here for a while now, yet he still didn't know half the world. So he decided to head straight to the Tamers Guild today. The moment Shelty rolled up at Tamers Guild, she greeted him like always, right on cue. Then Taechai admitted he wanted to dig deeper into Tamers, so he showed up here today, and Shelty couldn't believe he knew barely anything, even though he's got an abnormal non-familiar. Taechai just shrugged and blamed it on being raised in the countryside. So she hit him with a monster encyclopedia, along with the hideouts of all kinds of monsters. Taechai scanned the exact habitats of the monsters he owned, while Serna and Lu had zero clues, nothing at all. Taechai was totally obsessed with the cute, fluffy monsters. And just like that, his gaze locked onto something he couldn't possibly ignore. His face slammed into the open book, as if the pages could stop him. Book, and that's when he spotted a cat-type monster lurking inside. Shelty leaned in and said it was a forest cat, and Taechai instantly lit up, dying to find out more. So she warned him, to find that forest cat, he'd have to slip into a neighboring country and trek straight into the forest. But if he rode in a carriage, the whole journey would take about a month. Tech figured if he just hopped on Luke, they'd reach their goal way faster than waiting a whole month. Seeing his interested face, she grinned and said a forest cat would look insanely cute in Taechai's cafe. She shoved a map into his hands. Right after that, Taechai bolted straight home to team up with Luke and hash it out. Luke, he shouted his name and jolted him awake from deep sleep. Luke snapped, asking what could possibly matter more than his comfy sleep. Then Taechai grinned and said he wanted to head for the neighboring country. Luke's mind snapped back to the neighboring Asuran kingdom, and he asked Taechai, "Why do you want to go there?" Taechai grinned and said he came to tame the forest cat that prowls the woods of Asuran kingdom. Cerberus practically buzzed with excitement when he heard his friends were about to get bigger. Taechai told Luke that regular carriages would take about a month to get there. Then Luke snapped back that carriages pulled by horses. No one could outrun a noble Fenrir like him, so he's snatching Taechai and launching there in an instant. He even offered to let Taechai climb onto his back, but Taechai hesitated hard, because the last ride still left a sour taste. Luke shot inwardly a question about that look, and Taechai grinned and said it was nothing. He was just so insanely happy Luke finally agreed to take him there. There Sir Eris suddenly chimed in, saying he wanted to go with them too. Taechai grinned and said Luke could even hop onto its back, but Luke shot back, "Don't jump into our conversation." So they better listen to Luke, because they've already lost to him before, and Serge's out here whining that it'll feel lonely if he just stays at home. Luke stepped up right then, leaned into Cerberus, and told them he wanted someone to guard the berry rabbits here, because the only time he could ask them was when Luke and he were still there, and once they left, that chance was gone. When the server got picked and relied on, it lit up with excitement and started wagging its tail like crazy. Tachi couldn't resist reaching out and giving that fluffy, wagging tail a quick touch. And Cerberus loved every second of it, like being gently stroked. Taechai absolutely loved the fluffy tail, swishing around his hands and teasing his cheeks. Then Luke snapped at Cerberus, telling him to keep his distance from Taechai and to actually keep a watchful eye on the house. Taechai's last worry wasn't strategy anymore, it was food, because Cerberus can't feed everyone, so Taechai may have to hire someone on the spot for a quick part-time gig. He stormed into the Commerce Guild and grilled them for the rules on how to grow your workforce. The receptionist shot back that there was nothing unusual at all, and he could either beg the guild to step in and mediate for him, or kick off his own recruitment. She believed he had to recruit someone himself, just so the hired guy wouldn't end up treating the monsters rough. Just then, Heimri spotted Taechai and practically lunged forward to greet him at once. And Taechai couldn't believe his luck. Meeting her by pure chance felt perfect. Then he went ahead and told her straight up that he'd been thinking about hiring some short-term help. As soon as she heard that, Mary snapped into action and jumped at the chance, because she couldn't wait to stay with the berry rabbits all the time. Taechai definitely didn't think she'd be that hooked. Then she asked, voice shaking, if she wasn't good enough for her, and she answered, straight-faced, that she might have a rough time being treated like a child. She brushed it off, saying it didn't matter, but Taechai wouldn't let it go. Then he spotted another young girl, just like Henry, running the flower shop. Haima told him, for someone her age, running a shop solo isn't even that rare. And go over it, she's sure Taekai's place won't be that much work. Taechai even shrugged, thinking it'd be fine since the biggest problem Luke ever caused was simply following him. So he asked her to trail after him, promising he'd spill all the work details at the cafe, and I happily followed Luke all the way there, where the Bari rabbits and Cerberus tore into a roaring welcome for him. Henry couldn't wait. He was thrilled that if she became an employee, she'd get to experience it too. After that, Teji leaned in over tea and told her he'd be out hunting a new Fluffy, so he reckoned it'd take him about 25 days before he came back. Mary leaned in and demanded, "So what are you going to tame?" He shot back, "I'll tame that fluffy forest cat from the neighboring country," and Hamari loved it, because that cat was insanely fluffy. But Amiri shot him a question. "Does this mean my short-term job lasts just 25 days? Taechai nodded like it sounded brutal, yet Amiri's real shock was how he could reach the Azurim kingdom in only 25 days. She then leaned in and told him, "Yeah, I've beaten a forest cat before," and swore she didn't even mess with its fur, so now she couldn't wait to do it again. Teiichi leaned in and told her, "I'll leave the moment Himiri figures out what I'm here to do." Emery shot back, "I'm a free adventurer right now, so you can count on me." Teiichi told her, "All right, then I'll train you on the job until we're done. and during that time, they'd also hash out her salary. He laid out her shifts and said she'd earn 10,000 shells a day on an hourly rate, and Haima shot back that it was way too much for the job. But Taikai was determined to make sure he paid the right price, so his family would be cared for the way they truly deserved. Haimiri promised she'd take care of every single one of them properly, because she loved all those familiars so much. Then Taikai drilled her in the job she'd have to handle in the cafe, apron flapping, fluffy details and all. That's the proof she's officially a cafe employee. Then Taikai turns to his familiars and declares that from today on, Mary will be joining their crew. And now he leaned in and laid out her tasks one by one. It kicked off every morning by checking the familiars' health. Right there, you could tell how they were doing just by how full of energy they felt. Himiri realized monsters hardly ever got weaker because they were already built like tanks. Next, Taichai grabbed her attention and told her to follow close as he taught her the ins and outs of bathing the familiars. He hauled her to the backyard and pointed to a little shack. Turns out it was the bathroom for all the familiars. Taichai told her she could grab the towel and anything else she needed right there. And then right at the end, he led her to the bathtub. I can't believe my eyes, there's a bathtub even for the familiars. Then he brought her to the faucets that blasted hot water, and she just had to ask him how it all worked. But Taichai couldn't find the words, so he swallowed his pride and apologized for pulling out a bit of tech from his homeland. Right then, Luke made his choice. He stripped down, dove into the tub, and let the water take over. And when the other familiars crashed into the bath with him, Taichai couldn't help but grin with pure relief. Then he guided her step by step, showing her exactly how to wash their bodies the right way. But when Henry saw the monster bath for the first time, panic jolted through her, and the fur flattened instantly. Taichi told her it was totally normal for the fur to look like that after washing. Then they had to dry it the right way with towels. I honestly thought her magic would be way more convenient than this. So she unleashed her wind magic, and in the blink of an eye, it scorched the fur familiars dry to nothing. Just look at how insanely fast they pulled it off. After that job was done, he sat her down and taught her the ropes, how to run the store and serve customers their orders, while he passed the familiars one after another. Training finished, Tachi snapped to action. He packed up a bag because it was finally time to go, told his familiars to stay put and watch the house while he was gone. And he told Cerberus, straight up, that Hammery would be showing up to the store starting the very next morning. Cerberus leaned in and asked if they could just hang out with the customers when they arrived, and Taiking immediately nodded along. Then he plopped down and started petting them like they were family, all while swearing he'd definitely load up on souvenirs from the neighboring country. Then Luke snapped at Taichai to hurry, and Taichai jumped up, ready to hear the mad, impatient Luke. He apologized for making him wait, insisted it wasn't on purpose, and swore it just happened because he couldn't help it. He loved them all. Luke's composure cracked the moment he heard that. And just like that, Taikai was geared up and ready to take off, while Surges walked him out and promised they'd see each other again soon. Tachi surged onto Luke, racing to hit the next town before sunrise, determined to stay hidden, because Luke's true size would terrify anyone who spotted them. Taichai told Luke loud and clear that he'd have his back through anything. Then Luke told him bluntly that he was the weaker one. Taichai's got it, he'll step in and shield him. Taichai realized Luke was trustworthy in the most important ways, and with the night stretching on, they kept pushing forward together. Next morning, Taichai stepped outside and locked eyes on a breathtaking sunrise blazing over the mountains. He felt that rush in his bones, because it hadn't even been that long since he'd been reborn in this world, after grinding as a salaryman with almost zero time to breathe. And yeah, since we're talking about rest, Taikai only managed to slip into that cat cafe once a month during his leave. It was all going nowhere until one wild accident, and a cat god stepped into his life. And he got reborn into this world after death. Bam! Only to find himself handed special powers and even given the chance to run a cozy little cafe. And now, thanks to the cat god's convenient skills, he won over regulars and fully enjoyed life, running his cafe like a boss. Now he was hunched over the map, zeroing in on the Asurum kingdom where the forest cat hides, because if he could tame that beast, he'd finally earn the title of an official cat lover. Luke suddenly ordered him to hop on his back fast, so they could dash to the nearby town and avoid having to camp out. Taichai couldn't stop smiling at how kind Luke was, and he wrapped his arms around his fur, staring in pure awe, thinking, if I can snag this forest cat that fast, this is going to be insanely amazing. Right as Luke launched into a sprint, Taki blurted that going slow would still be fine, but Luke snapped back that he was weak for yelling like that just to make them slow down. And he said that sprinting hard made the world feel better. Taichai shot a look back at the breathtaking view and told them to slow down for a moment, just enjoy it, like they weren't in a rush to move on. Luke told them to get their goods ready later during their break. Then out of nowhere, a monster chicken lunged at them from the side. Luke snatched it out of the air in an instant, and Taichai stuffed it straight into his magic bag. Then, later that night, they camped at a spot where Taichai had a front row seat to the most breathtaking starry sky. Luke leaned in and asked if it was really that rare for Taichai. Taichai just nodded and explained that where he lived, places like this almost never showed up. Then Luke leaned in and reminded him, like, "Dude, it's time to eat." Taichai ripped open the bag, cooked the meat with his skill, and then his stomach dropped when he realized the ingredients weren't nearly enough. Chi ripped open the bag and pulled out a bunch of ingredients. Then he fired up his cooking skills again, and before long, he whipped up a delicious dish using monster chicken's meat, and promised Luke he could have as much as his heart wanted. Luke dug into that delicious food, then told himself Luke's cooking skills were totally on point, and every meal Luke served hit the mark, leaving Taichai grinning because Luke was genuinely satisfied. Then he grabbed a bit and tested it himself. Taichai felt like he could devour every single one of these tasty dishes without even slowing down. After more grueling travel, they finally rolled into Charmed Town, built on the order of the Shulkut Kingdom and the Azurin Kingdom. Taichai strode into town, and the crowd proved it was a lively place. Taichai reckoned they'd better hunt down the Tamers Guild first, because they needed somewhere that would let Luke stay too. Luke snapped, "What's up?" the second he caught Taichai's look, and Taichai shrugged it off, saying he was just admiring how magnificent his coat of fur was. Luke instantly got flustered and insisted it was obvious, because of course, he was a noble Fenrir, while Taichai scanned the area and finally snagged a place to crash, and Luke still had the nerve to call him weak for being worn out. As Taichai crossed paths with Luke, he could only hope he'd somehow find a little more stamina to keep up. Then Luke leaned in and asked, "So, you really like those forest cats that much, huh?" And out of nowhere, Tachi lit up and started talking. Turns out he was being kept alive by the cats themselves. And the second he thought about petting a cat, he felt pure motivation surge through him to give it his all. Luke can't stop wondering what kind of battle he survived back then, and Taichai immediately blurts out that it wasn't just a fight, it was a company. Taichai couldn't stop wondering how the cats were doing back at the cat cafe. And just like that, the day rolled on, yet he couldn't stop replaying the memories, laughing to himself about how insanely fun those times were. Then Luke stumbled to a stop, and through all these wild, awkward expressions like he'd completely lost it. Taichai apologized for it, but Luke's paw felt so good that he couldn't help smirking, and Luke just stared, asking why he was grinning like a total idiot. And Taichai basically shrugged and said Luke was just ridiculously cute. Luke shot down a noble Fenrir like him, and somehow it still felt impossible for something that strong to be cute. And he hated being thrown in the same pile as those berry rabbits. Taichai told him you can't rank cuteness, and then basically confirmed that to him, every single one of his familiars was adorable. Luke spun away from him, cutting off the moment like a blade. Taichai clocked it. Luke wasn't just acting up, he was straight up shy, and that made Luke feel cute all over again, so Luke told him, "Go to sleep right now." Taichai decided he had to be right and shot Luke a quick goodnight before shutting his eyes. That night he drifted off with a promise. Luke would get something delicious the moment they woke up. Then he patted Luke and fell asleep. After a while they started roaming the town, hunting for ingredients to try, and Luke shot Taichi a question. "So, is there dragon meat too?" But Taichi just shook his head, because deep down, he knew that wasn't happening. So he turned to Luke and asked, "Why not go for the wild minotaur tail soup?" Taichai handed Luke and himself 2 steaming bowls of soup. "And you devoured it like it was pure heaven." Luke shared the exact same thought about the suit. After that, Taichai jumped in with a grin, and told them to hunt around some more for other mouthwatering meat. Soon enough, he stepped up into the line, and started his way into the Azurin Kingdom at the border. Luke blurted, "Why don't they just jump the walls?" Taichai told them to get it right, because he didn't want to draw attention, so he kept the cafe running quietly, letting the Cerberus stay peaceful while he carried on. When it was his turn, Taichai clocked the exact moment the guard's face lit up with shock as he spotted Luke. But pretty soon he was totally fine with him, and even praised the coat of fur. Luke's face lit up, because in the end, this quick little run-in at the gate was exactly what he needed. Taichai swaggered up to the guards and introduced himself as a tamer. Then he flashed his guild card to shut down any doubt. After they checked his registration as a tamer, the guards waved him through the gates. And Taichai breathed out in relief that Luke didn't stir up any trouble this time. The guards even told him to handle it from here. And now, Taichai was finally ready to meet the forest cats of this Azurin Kingdom. Taichai sprinted into the Azurin Kingdom and rolled up on its legendary forest town, Fallen. And right there he started spotting a whole parade of toys, wolves, weird shapes and other strange masters, all lined up like they were waiting to be discovered. Taichai couldn't stop enjoying those artworks, so he leaned in and asked Luke if he thought they were just as well made too. And somehow, one of them even looked like Luke. Luke snapped at him, Don't lump me in with those weakling wolves. Then Taikai snapped that he was only talking about what things looked like from the outside. The shopkeeper eyed Taichai and asked if his familiar was messing with the toys, and Taichai quickly apologized, then hurried back to fix the trouble. The shopkeeper shrugged and said it was fine. Taikai just nodded, because he'd carved it before and knew he'd seen a wolf. And sure, Taikai's familiar looked like a much tougher monster, so they couldn't just lump them together. When Luke heard that, his smile lit up. Then the shopkeeper leaned in and said there were tamers who could actually talk to their familiars. Years later, he leaned in and asked if Tachi could hear it. And when Tachi said he understood what monsters say, the whole room felt like it just went colder. And right now, his familiar is fuming, furiously mad that he got shoved in with those wolves. The shopkeeper leaned in and asked if he'd just rolled into the fallen town. Taikai just nodded, like it was the truth. So the shopkeeper pointed him down the right path and promised he'd hit an inn called the Forest Cat Stop. Taikai caught the vibe that the name might hide forest cats, but he couldn't shake the worry. Would familiars even be allowed there? The shopkeeper shot him a confident grin and said, "Don't worry, this place is run by a tamer," and Taikai instantly felt his shoulders drop with gratitude. And Luke was thrilled. He finally got to stick together at the very end with Luke. Taikai followed the directions with purpose and finally burst into the Forest Cat Inn, where the owner of the place himself came to meet him and ran the reception, welcoming him in. Taikai leaned in and asked the owner if he could stay here with his familiar, and the owner nodded, letting him keep his place. Taikai read the note and promised, "I'll set up a huge room for you right away," and Taikai snapped back, thanking him for how fast he understood. Then his gaze snapped to a real forest cat, and it brought the keys straight to his room. Taichi nearly lost his breath as ore slammed into him. The owner boldly presented the forest cat as one of his familiars. "He told me his younger sister jumps in now and then, but most days he's running the inn solo. So yeah, that's why his familiars step up to help too." Taichi finally clocked it. This wasn't some scam, it was the real cat inn, and he immediately thanked the cat god for bringing him here. The owner looked totally baffled, so Taichi explained he'd come to tame the forest cats, and the owner shot back, "Why on earth would you tame them?" "Because they weren't all that strong, and they couldn't use any special magic either." Taikai looked him in the eye and told him, straight up, that he just loved their fluffy charm. Upon hearing it, the guy froze in shock. Then Taikai finally explained what fluffiness really means. And he clocked it too. He praised Taikai as interesting, then snapped his own intro, Arts, a tamer and the inn's owner, and Taikai shot back with his own introduction. After that, Arts admitted he used to be an adventurer, until reality crushed him, and he couldn't grow strong, so he had no choice but to inherit his parents' ended plan. And since the forest cats were basically monsters he couldn't control with his lousy taming skills, Arts just wasn't tough enough to tag along with the other adventurers' party. Kiichi could picture exactly how that went down. After all, cats weren't exactly built to overpower anyone. While Arch kept talking, Luke stared right at the forest cat. And in the end, Arts admitted the truth. His inn life was falling apart too, just like his whole adventure life. Taikai couldn't wrap his head around it. This place actually had cats too. Arch snapped back that there was a downright shameful story tied to why they ended up here. Still, he promised he'd do his absolute best to look after Taikai while he's staying here. And Taikai felt genuinely happy to be treated with that kind of hospitality. And he figured this world had zero love for little creatures, maybe because they were monsters, but he was certain that once people truly saw their charm, they'd fall head over heels. And to make it worse, these cats at the inn were strictly here to help with the arts, never to mess around with customers. Still, the question gnawed at him. What if the cats finally started playing with the people? Since there was a real chance it could become the hottest, most exclusively popular thing of all. Arts motioned Taikai to follow him to his room, but Taikai suddenly blurted out, loud and bold, "Why don't we turn this into an inn where people can actually interact with cats?" And Arts froze, totally thrown by his fiery ideas. Followed by going on about how cats are the world's treasure, all because of those innocent-looking eyes, that fluffy coat, and that sleek, perfectly shaped build. And somehow, they could even admire the flowers blooming right off their body, pure perfection, while Arts was sweating bullets. For a while, Taichi kept dumping tons of wild cat ideas on him, one after another. Luke started to feel restless and bored out of his mind, then snapped at Taichi. "So what are you planning to do? No matter how adorable those cats look, they're still monsters, and humans don't just accept monsters that easily." Taikai insisted he had a secret plan, saved just for this moment, and swore he could pull it off the same way he always did with his cafe. Taikai cracked open his imagination and used his creation skill to forge a brand new cat toy out of thin air. Luke demanded, "What is that?" And Taikai tried to block the view, swinging it right in front of him, but it gave absolutely nothing back. So Taikai shrugged and decided cats were the next test, rushing over to first ask Arts for permission. Then Taichai caught a mouthwatering scent in the air, and his stomach practically begged for dinner. Arts, busy cooking dinner, snapped her head up and asked Taikai if he needed anything. Taikai revealed the item he'd made, then shot Arts a grin and asked, "Can I play with the cats?" Then a forest cat locked eyes with Taichai and Nyord. And that sent his heart racing, because the cat was so cute, Taikai couldn't stop smiling. Then, right after he swung the toy, he saw even more forest cats come running in. And he held his hands back from the cats, biting his own patience, because he couldn't afford to be hated by them. Then he flicked the cat toys into that playful little side, and the cats suddenly clocked what was going on. Taichai yanked the toy back, and decided this cat teaser would totally do the trick. And just like he figured it would, the cat sprang to life and went wild with the cat teaser. And Taichi was thrilled, because that teaser might lure them in, just so they could rush over and pounce on it like it was pure treasure. Art stood to the side, staring in awe, and blurted, "Amazing," because it was the first time he'd ever seen his cats home so happy. Taichai even admitted it was his first time seeing cats react like that. His little cat teaser sent them into pure joy. Tachi geared up for a whole day of cat chaos in that moment. And in those tear-soaked moments, Taikai couldn't help but think, "I've got to make more toys for the cats." Later, Tachi was alone in his room, staring at that cat teaser, until Luke burst in and pointed it out. Out that he'd let himself go, looking totally slovenly. Then Tachi suddenly jerked in surprise. But his grin just wouldn't quit, creepy as anything, and stuck there. He decided to crank out even more toys, so he could hang out and play even more with those forest cats. Then he leaned in and demanded Luke tell him, could those forest cats actually talk? Luke shot back, saying it was totally impossible for those forest cats, trained by the arts, to talk. But hey, if there's a whole pack of forest cats, their leader better be able to talk with them. Taikai realized he'd have to break in an entire pack of forest cats, just to get his hands on the one who could talk, which snapped him right back to that wild talk with the cat god, an actual talking cat. Taichi was back to getting lost in his head, replaying that wild conversation he'd had with the cats. Lupe snapped him back to reality and demanded, "So are you gonna start making toys right now?" Taichi didn't bother denying it. And then Luke finally crashed into sleep. Taichi couldn't stop wondering if, somehow, Luke had started feeling lonely because of him. And once it looked right, he couldn't resist, so he whipped up something for Luke too. A flying desk powered by his creation magic. And Luke clocked it too. He demanded to know what that was, and Taichi grinned and said he built that flying disc just to mess around and play with Luke. But then he said they'd have to head to a wide-open space. Luke admitted he normally wouldn't touch anything childish like playing with it, but when Taichi went to the trouble of crafting it with his skill, Luke had no choice. He'd try it, and Taichi could clearly see the eager excitement in him, which was honestly kind of adorable. Now he whipped up a bunch of new cat toys, like a bell ball and a snazzy little tunnel. He prayed the forest cats would love every last one of them. And right when he tossed the call in front of the cat, it bolted after the ball like a missile. And he kept poking at it, eyes wide with pure curiosity. Taichi couldn't help but grin. He found it absolutely adorable. Then Luke snapped, "Go play with the flying disc first." And Tech caved fast, agreeing to head out right away. At that moment, Arts rushed over after hearing the noise, and when he looked, he saw his cat was clearly having the time of its life. He had no idea his cats could play this wild, and Taichi couldn't stop smiling because they were loving every second of it. Then Taikai leaned in and told Arts, "Tell them they can toss the balls. Cats love to chase, and they'll have a blast playing with them." Now Taichi told us he'd handle it later. He had to rush out and play with Luke first, because Luke was already hurrying like crazy. Arts asked if he could try throwing the ball too, and Taichi nodded like, "Go for it." And he even told them about the tunnel he built so the forest cats could play. Arch felt pure gratitude, because Taichi was the kind of customer he'd always dreamed of. Taikai grinned and said it was truly his pleasure to meet you. Luke, Hayes, and Taichi waste zero time and charge out to try this wild, flying disc thing. Luke sprinted through the forest and hauled Taikai into a wide open stretch of grassy land. Taichi knew this spot was perfect, and he couldn't help wishing he could bring his lunch and hang out with the other familiars here too. Luke cut into his thoughts and blurted, "So, how do you use this flying disc?" Taichi could tell Luke was absolutely buzzing with excitement. Then he told Luke, "Wait a second," and with a sharp toss, he launched the flying disc and hung back until it drifted a good distance away. Then Tachi dared Luke to chase the flying dish he tossed at him. If Luke could grab it, that was the whole game. Luke stared like he'd never heard of it, and Taichi's stomach sank, because even this game was unknown in their world. He told Luke to go first, and said he'd instantly get why it was so much fun. Luke nodded and agreed to give it a shot. And then Taichi hurled the flying disc, but Luke snatched it almost the second it moved. Taichi went totally speechless, because Luke's strength didn't even cross his mind until that disc flew. Luke even admitted it. This game was way too easy, while Taichai stood there, defeated, like the fight had been stolen from him. Just then, Taichai ditched the original plan and told Luke to snatch that flying desk right as it was about to crash. Taichai broke down the game step by step, and even though Luke looked totally lost, he still clenched his nerves and said, "All right, show me." Luke asked Taichai if it would look way more impressive to grab it at the last second before it smashes the ground, and Taichai grinned and said it'll be way more fun that way. He hurled the disc again, faster and harder than before. This time though, both Taichai and Luke held their breath, until Taichai finally flashed Luke the signal to grab it. Luke leaned on his instincts and lightning agility, then bolted upward. He bolted upward and snatched the flying disc at the last second, right before it hit the ground, and just like always, Luke was absolutely incredible. And Taichi couldn't shake the feeling that Luke was still clamping down on his real power, even while he was riding on his back. Luke handed the disc back, and Taichai immediately praised him for pulling it off on the very first try, because deep down Luke's kindness was real, even if he talks like a jerk. And just a few seconds after Luke told him to throw again, Taichai threw that flying disc again. But this time, the disc slipped for just a tiny distance by pure mistake, which left Luke with basically nothing to grab. Luke shot him a mocking look like, "Is that the best you've got?" Taichai immediately apologized for not throwing it right. Then Luke leaned in and asked Taichai, "So it's that tough just to throw it?" Taichai smirked and said it was simple to toss, but getting it to fly far was the real fight. Luke threw the disc himself, but it face-planted just a meter from their spot. Luke's pride burned so hot that he refused to quit. So he hurled the disc again, aiming with all his might. And this time it launched way past 100 meters. Luke swore it was easier than you'd ever believe. Taichai figured it would be a breeze for Luke. Just look at how strong he is. He felt that burst of strength. Then Luke demanded Taichai go grab it since Luke had thrown it this time, and Taichai snapped back that he couldn't because he was weak after they'd played for a while. Taichai stumbled back to the inn wrecked with exhaustion, and that's when he heard giggles and voices from some girls. Taichai scratched his head, wondering who else might have shown up, then spotted some girls nearby, all giggles, playing with the toy car and forest cat setup he'd made. Taichai stared in disbelief, as those cat toys started blowing up way bigger than he ever expected. Arts welcomed Taichai back, and told him everyone's been going wild over those cat toys. Then one of the girls leaned toward her brother, and asked if that guy, Taichai, was actually the one who made them. Hearts nodded, then introduced his sister Lucy, and Lucy grinned, and said she's juggling life right now, adventurer by day and innkeeper by night, just like her brother. Taichai stepped up and introduced himself to Lucy too. Lucy brought it up, then boom, she introduced two more of her adventurer friends, Marilia and Bianca. Marilia couldn't stop smiling as she played with the adorable forest cats, and Bianca suddenly felt like she didn't want to fight monsters anymore. Taichai totally bought into it. Those forest cats were cute, no question. He shot a glance back at the forest cats, crowding into the tunnel he'd carved back then. He figured it out, let customers interact with forest cats, and that idea looked like it could seriously work, so he decided to lean even harder into a cat-focused experience. He figured it was probably a terrible idea to let cats run wild through the guest rooms, so maybe he should whip up a cat tower for them. And right then, Taichai spotted the perfect empty patch of wall, and asked Lucy if they could slap together a cat tower using boards right on that wall. He told her it was just like a safe spot made for cats, high up, so the forest cats could climb, perch, and finally relax. Lucy nodded immediately and said, "Yeah, we can totally pull that off," and then added that she'd jump in too, helping make it happen. Lucy said they still had some wood stored, so they could use it to build the staircase on the wall, and Peiki asked if it was really okay to just change the plan at the end like that. She shot back, "Don't worry, there's nothing to be scared about." She was ready to tear things apart and remake them any way she had to, just to make sure their endgame went perfectly. And honestly, she didn't buy the whole adventurer dream either, so at the end, she decided to push herself even harder. Tachi could tell she truly loved that in her parents left behind, and he decided to respect her heart and jump in to help even more. Lucy had a blast toying with the cat teaser, and then Arts pulled up beside Lucy and told her he'd decided to build it so customers could actually interact with forest cats, so he didn't mind at all if Taichai put up the boards himself. Taichai was totally fine with that, and he was thrilled to churn out even more ideas, like his fluffy little cafe, where people could make real memories with monsters. Arts poured out his gratitude to Haikai for everything he'd done, then swore he'd stop by Haikai's cafe the moment the inn finally started thriving. Arts shot out a handshake, using it as both his heartfelt thanks and his proof that friendship was real. Taichai grinned, happily took the offer, and couldn't wait to jump in and help out, staying right there under his care like always. Later, he headed to the backyard storage, where Lucy was lining up wooden planks for the boards. Then Taikai praised her for how well she was doing. Lucy shot back that she wasn't just helping, she was the one who handled the wood storage, so she'd been practicing this kind of work non-stop. That's why she pushed to take on most of the work herself, instead of dumping it all on their guest. Taikai could feel her kindness, and he knew she'd been through hell during these times. Lucy admitted she'd always dreamed of being an adventurer, but the second she lived the dream, doubts started clawing at her. Taichai could see it all over her face, and he knew why. Mission after mission, death was always hovering right there. He leaned in and asked if she planned to stay an adventurer for life, and she shook her head fast, admitting she hadn't even thought that far ahead yet. Lucy beamed, dreaming of striking gold as an adventurer, anything to lighten her brother's burden, and Tachi couldn't help but feel touched by the steady heart she always showed. After they were finished building the boards, they hustled over to wrap up the cat tower next. Luke crushed a great nap, while Lucy and Taichai finally nailed every last board into that perfect staircase pattern. Taichai grinned at how it turned out, while Marilia leaned in and grilled Lucy. "Are you always a better carpenter than an adventurer?" And Lucy snapped back with a loud yelling fit. While she shot off to check the boards, Arts made sure they'd look perfect, good enough for the cats to sprawl and rest on. He spun around and asked his forest cats if they wanted to give it a try. And the forest cat cards flipped onto the board instantly, then settled right on the squares like they were delivering lucky little fortune dolls. A bunch of other cats streamed after the one perched on the tallest board, settling down right beside them. But it sparked a brutal fight between them, both clawing for the one spot. Lucy snapped when she saw those cats perched on the boards, glaring like they wanted a fight. Taichai leaned in and told her to let them slide for now. Arts then burst into loud clapping to summon every single cat. And when he called, they obeyed his command and plunged off the boards. Taichai's eyes lit up when he realized these forest cats weren't just adorable, they actually listened and obeyed too, and the feeling was so wild he wondered if he'd even be able to sleep tonight. Then Arts raised the word and told everyone it was time for dinner. And he even shouted for Marilia and Bianca to come over too, because he wanted them all to dig into some stew together. Well, everybody's got a heart, and that's what makes this rule stick. Over dinner, they sat down, talked non-stop, and the whole night felt genuinely awesome. Lucy swore she could figure everything out from here on out all by herself, especially with those cat toys helping her along. Taichai clocked that Lucy's got a real knack for making cat toys, and now that he's lent a hand to get this whole idea rolling, things are really taking off. Taichai can't wait to see just how legendary this place gets the next time he shows up. For now, he put all his energy into taming his own forest cats first. The very next morning, he stormed out toward the forest. Luke floated the idea that they could knock the job out faster with some tasty bait, but Taki snapped back that they were here to tame forest cats, not slaughter them. Still, Luke couldn't help it. He secretly wanted to snag a dragon too, like catching 2 targets with 1 throw. Taichai was convinced Luke earned another dragon steak, because without his help, he never would have made it this far, though Taichai really wished Luke could handle the forest cats and still keep them safe. Right then, Luke leaned in and asked if they should push even deeper into the woods. Taichai told him to scour this area a little longer, because forest cats are meant to be weak and easy to tame, so they shouldn't be lurking in the deeper woods. Yet even after searching for a while, Taichai scoured the woods and found not a single forest cat, and that was seriously weird, because the art had claimed they were everywhere. Hey, she couldn't shake the weird feeling, and wondered if they'd stumbled into the wrong forest. He couldn't wait, so he went straight to it, opened the status, then hunted through it with his search skills, so he could track down where the forest cats were hiding. Luke clocked Taichi messing around and blurted, "What are you doing?" And Taichi admitted he was testing a skill, just to see if he could use it to track down the forest cats. Luke practically froze when he realized Taichai had some seriously rare skills, yet Taichai had no clue those gifts were anything special. Then he spotted it, his skill pinpointing the forest cats, hideout with sharp, effortless precision, and Taichi couldn't help but be blown away by how accurate and simple it was. Luke got the heads up that a pack of forest cats was right up ahead, waiting for them. Luke couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, because he didn't pick up their presence at all. So he snapped his focus back on, and bam, he sensed even stronger enemies lurking out there, scaring the forest cats into staying hidden. Taikai felt it could spell disaster if Luke claimed stronger monsters were out there, but before he could worry too long, Luke pitched going in and feeding it right then and there. Taikai couldn't shake the disappointment after blurting out that sudden idea, and he leaned in to ask Luke if it was truly okay, because Luke had warned him earlier that those monsters were insanely strong. Luke blurted that he was a noble Fenrir, and swore there was no universe where he'd ever get beaten by anyone. Luke said the strong monster was a brutal, terrifying enemy, straight from a forest cat's eyes, and now they'd track it down and smash it, while Taki realized the real catch. he'd be the one riding Luke, so he begged Luke to go easy, to be gentle. Even Luke's slow pace was still too quick for Portisai, and after a little while, they finally spotted the monster they had to take down. And that's when it morphed into a monster crow. Luke declared that the giant crow was a gutless monster that only hunts the weak, and Taikai pushed, asking if he could take it. Luke just nodded like, yeah, of course. So he yelled to Taichai, hold on tight, and launched himself into the air to slam the flying giant crow. The crow jolted them out of nowhere, then launched a sudden attack like it meant business. Luke barely even moved, then he dodged the strike and surged straight for the weak crow, shark claws first. Luke struck the crow down in an instant, then spat that he couldn't stand those monsters who keep hunting the weak. Luke told Taichai to stash the crow's body in his bag for materials, and in that moment, Taichai felt it. Luke was looking out for him, not treating him like a tool. Then Taikai suddenly heard rustling sounds spilling out from the bushes. And panic hit him. What if it was another crow? Luke snapped that he shouldn't cower behind him out of fear, because he was safe there with Luke. Taichai spotted the source of the noise, two monster ears twitching nearby, with strange cat sounds weaving through the chaos. He froze for a second, staring, because the mystery behind those bushes wasn't a monster at all. It was a whole group of forest cats hiding there. Tachi couldn't stop himself. He wanted to pet that cat so bad, until he saw its movements were weak, as if it could barely hold on. So yeah, it was way weaker than normal, like something had been off for a while. Luke said the cat must have been holed up in that burrow for ages, and the moment Taichai heard it, he bolted to the burrow to feed the cat after that crow started circling and squawking. But Luke wasn't sure what would actually be healthy for a weak cat, so he hesitated. Then he blurted out that maybe Luke could try giving it some of those bunny cookies. Taichai crept up to the cat, cracking open a few cookies as he moved slow, gentle, and totally harmless. Taichai soothed the cat his own way and promised, with total confidence, that the cookie was totally safe. Careful and quiet, the cat inched over, sniffed the cookie, then dug in and started munching. The cats look way better now that they've had their fill, and it crept up to Taichai like it was on a mission to thank him, leaving him wondering if the cat actually liked him. Maybe because of that whole One Love by All Fluffies title. And either way, it looked like he was moments away from mastering it. So Taikai caught and tamed the wild forest cat right by his feet, then named it Sakura. And the second he grabbed it, he just kept petting the cat because it was way too cute, until Luke snapped at him again for that sloppy face he made.